Well, hello everyone. I do apologize for being a couple minutes late. I was trying to find an article to show you guys the scale of the protests that happened for what we're going to watch today. Because today we're going to do something that some might consider this to be a little bit boring, some might consider it to be a little bit wonky, but there is a bill in Texas that would ban gender modification surgeries for minors. And on Monday, they did a hearing for this bill, and it was and basically like 1,000 trans activists showed up. And what I want to do is I want to watch the hearing portion of it, which is, I think, more calm than the protest version. But what I was looking for when I was not going live on time, because that's just the way it goes, is I was looking for an article to show you guys the scale. And I knew I had seen like videos of it on Twitter, but I couldn't find them. And so instead, I found this article from the Austin Chronicle, and you can look and see those are all the trans activists that showed up. Like, how crazy is that? Let's just read a little bit here so we know what we're getting into. Many LGBTQ advocacy groups in Texas say that if there's one anti-trans law to rail against this legislative session, and there are dozens, it's this one. House Bill 1686, filed by Representative Tom Oliverson. HB 1686 would prohibit physicians and healthcare providers from administering gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapies, to transgender folks, FOLKS for a change, under 18. In addition to mirroring the 30 other states that are considering or having passed laws hindering access to these life-saving treatments, this Texas bill takes it a jackboot step further by revoking the licenses of doctors who prescribe these treatments, denying Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, from paying for such treatments, and empowering the Attorney General to punish violators. Sidebar: Texas AG Ken Paxton is the same man who equated these medical treatments with child abuse in a memo last year. And so that is the protest that happened on Monday. And I'm sure there are a whole bunch of videos out there as well. But what we're going to be doing today is something a little bit more boring. We're actually going to be watching the testimony. And we're not going to watch all the testimony because there was 13 hours of testimony. 13 hours. I don't know what you guys were talking about when I was not live. Murphy's Pool says you should live stream while tripping on shrooms. No, I should absolutely not do that. Listen, guys, like, I may joke about this stuff as much as the next person, but the reality is that I view things like mushrooms, like ayahuasca, I view them as like sacred medicine. It's a sacred spiritual ritual. I don't do it just for recreation. Okay, yeah, hallucinating is fun, fine. And I don't do it all the time either. It's like this is like a once in a while like experience. You can't do this stuff all the time because you have to integrate your learnings. But no, I should absolutely not do that. I'm not going to be anywhere near technology when I'm doing sacred spiritual ceremonies. You guys can do whatever you want, but I'd like listen. I've been around sacred medicine long enough to know that if you F with sacred medicine, it will F with you. This is a sidebar, okay? This has nothing to do with what we're watching today. I once did an ayahuasca ceremony with a guy who, like, to give you guys some context, when you do ayahuasca ceremonies, like, for 2 weeks at least, if not longer, leading up to the ceremony, you're supposed to eat clean. You're not supposed to do any drugs. You're not supposed to drink. You're supposed to be about as pure as you can possibly be, up to and including sex, by the way. A lot of people don't even like orgasm in the weeks leading up to doing a ceremony, because you're like the sexual energy conflicts with the spiritual energy, all this stuff. So like you're supposed to actually take this stuff seriously. If you take it seriously, you're going to be just fine. I once did a ceremony with a guy who a couple hours before the ceremony was eating barbecue and drinking beer. Let me tell you what, that guy didn't have a good night. Did not have a good night at all. Was purging all effing night. So no. As much as I might joke about this stuff, I do actually take it seriously. It is for a specific spiritual purpose. It is always with intention. And you guys can do whatever you want, but if you want to do that stuff and then stream yourself on the internet, I just think that you're asking for trouble, okay? I have warned you. I have done my due diligence. Grandma Nay, off topic, can you be a psychopath and a sociopath at the same time? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can, Grandma Nay. I'm pretty sure that there are absolutely people on the internet who believe I am both a psychopath and a sociopath and a narcissist and a cluster B and every bad thing in the universe. So I'm gonna go with yes on that one. All right, we're being serious now because this is serious business. So we're not going to watch all of the testimony from this hearing because there was 13 hours of testimony. But we were talking about this testimony in my community Zoom earlier today. And so there's a couple things we're going to be looking for. Number one, there's testimony, I guess, from both sides. So they were like calling doctors, I guess, that were in favor or against this. And basically what we're going to see, I guess, is the committee questioning the doctors, whether they be for or against banning this type of surgery. And so I'm going to be interested in how the politicians react, the types of questions the politicians ask. I think this is going to be really insightful about the arguments that the progressive left is going to make against banning this type of surgery. And so I think that that's going to be good. There are also detransitioners that testified. I don't know specifically what order they went in, though, or any of that. So we're going to kind of play it by ear. So there are actually two parts of this. And again, actually, it's even more. It's almost 6 hours for part one and almost 9 hours for part two. So I was wrong. I'm sorry. 15 hours of testimony they heard on this bill. So we're going to watch some of it. I don't know how long we're going to go. But and maybe we'll even break it up and maybe we'll watch a little bit tomorrow as well. We're gonna have to see. Tomorrow I'm gonna have a bit of a different streaming schedule because I have the Liberty Women's Movie Night in New Hampshire tomorrow. We rented out a movie theater and no men are allowed. And so I gotta go to that probably around the same time that I'd usually be streaming. I might be streaming earlier, I might be streaming later. We're gonna have to see. Anyway, so I thought we would come and watch a little bit of this testimony. How does that sound to everyone? I want to see what they're saying. I want to see what the doctors are saying. I want to see what the politicians are saying. I want to see what the detransitioners are saying. As always, go right to the primary source of the information because anything that you get apart from doing the primary source is going to be filtered through whatever emotional connection people have with this bill. And I just want to see it. I just want to see it as it played out and we can make our judgments from there. Sin reminds everyone to mount that like button for us. Yes, please do so. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And of course, please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, Carlin, Karlyn.substack.com. Substack is actually my content hub. My hub is not YouTube. My hub is not even Twitter. My content hub is Substack. It is where I post my best content and where actually a lot of the content that I'm doing on Twitter and on YouTube are inspired from. It starts first with the Substack. So you can subscribe to my Substack for free. And I would encourage everyone to do so because it definitely leaves me a way to get in touch with you just in case like my YouTube channel gets pulled down or any of those things. It's basically like a mailing list. And so you will get notified every single time I post new content on the Substack. I'm trying to post the most unique and bestly curated. I'm not even sure that bestly is a word, but like the I know that adds a lot of credibility, right? The best curated unwoke content on the internet. And today, actually, just before the stream started, I posted this article about Gabrielle Clark, a friend of the channel, friend who's been around for a really long time, and she has just launched a new program to help parents whose kids have been captured by gender ideology, either in the schools or outside of the schools, what have you. And you can go and learn about Gabs's new program. I promise you, if you have kids in school, you need to see what Gabs is doing because Gabs's daughter was socially transitioned to think she was a boy. She wasn't, but her teachers told her that she were, and that she was rather, and then she got involved in a lot of online chat rooms and groups that left her vulnerable to men who like little girls. And that's real. That really did happen. And so Gabs was devastated by this, and she knew she had to save her daughter, and she developed a parenting program in order to do that. I actually, in this article, have a link to the on demand version of the program that Gabs and I put on together last year. We partnered for this webinar, which you can find on demand at activelyunwoke.com/on demand. It's called Affirming Reality, Overcoming the Effects of the Gender Cult. But Gabs has also just launched a new website to work with parents one-on-one. It's called Affirming Reality. You can find it at affirmingreality.com. And if you know parents who are having trouble with their kids getting sucked into this ideology in school, have them get in touch with Gabs. She's going to be able to help them, or share this program with them. They can watch it on demand. It's a 3-hour video. They can watch it whenever they have time. They can break it into 2 parts, etc., etc. But these are the things that will help parents to make sure their kids are not getting sucked into this ideology. And you can find that on activelyunwoke.com/right now. There we activelyunwoke.com/on demand. That's what I was trying to say. There we go. It's been quite a day, obviously. But you can also find this information on my Substack at carlin.substack.com. I also want to let people know that I have a special limited edition in the Unwoke art store. Now, yesterday, I started seeing a bunch of conservatives, if you could even call them that. I'm old enough to remember a couple years ago when I said on Twitter, I don't really think mentally ill people should be able to buy guns. And my Twitter feed for 3 days after that was filled with, shall not be infringed, Carlin. And that all came from conservatives. And the reason I bring that up is I find it a bit curious that conservatives are now calling for trans people to not be allowed to own guns because of what happened in Nashville. Now, of course, what happened in Nashville is a tragedy. I don't mean to exploit it at all, but I do think it is a little bit curious and, quite frankly, ragingly hypocritical for conservatives to be able to call for all guns to be taken away from all trans people. And so, in response to the ragingly hypocritical calls that I was hearing, and I don't want to hear from any conservatives, I don't know anyone who thinks that, because your influencers are absolutely saying this. I've documented at least 2 of them in this here article, and there are about 1,000 of them on Twitter. I could have made a whole long list of probably hundreds of conservatives that were calling for this yesterday. That's not a joke. But what I decided to do instead was to make this new image for my Unwoke art store that says, red flag laws are transphobic, with a nice trans AR-15, the best AR-15 for any trans person out there. And what you can do is you can share this meme. You can let conservatives know what you think about this boneheaded idea to institute red flag laws against their enemies, because apparently now all conservatives have decided they hate all trans people. By the way, guys, just so we're really clear, even though we're watching this hearing today and that might give people a certain impression of me, I actually don't care if people are trans. I respect the pronouns. As long as you're not trying to exert force over me or compel me to do something I don't want to do, I don't really care what you do with your body. I don't care how you live your life. It makes no difference to me. And I absolutely believe that trans people should be able to buy an AR-15 if they damn well want one. I believe trans people should be able to buy whatever gun they want. Or if they don't want to buy guns, that's fine too. But to say that trans people should not be allowed to buy guns, all because conservatives are having feelings and they're trying to, I don't even know what they're trying to do. Maybe they're trying to demonstrate the hypocrisy of the left, but they're really just showing that they are as hypocritical of the left. I truly have no idea. Anyway, so to cope with my feelings about conservatives being stupid on this issue, I decided to make this design. That's how I am channeling my aggression nowadays. And you can buy this design right now on a t-shirt. You can buy it on a hoodie. You can buy it on a sticker. Let me show you. There's actually one of the hoodies that's the purple version, but I've got a white version. The white version looks cool, but the best version of the hoodie, I think, is this awesome pink version. Like, look at that pink. I might even wear that. So you can buy all that right now in the Unwoke Art Store, which is at unwokeart.com. This is a limited edition, okay? So this is not going to be around forever. I think I'm going to have it around for like a week or so. And then once I get rid of it, it may not ever come back. So this is a very, very, very limited edition. I don't give a flying fuck what excuse you make for not liking trans people, bro. I don't care. Are I'm so glad we have a raging moron conservative who doesn't understand that if you institute red flag laws against trans people, they will absolutely be used against you. I just don't know what conservatives find so difficult to understand about this. You are calling for laws that will be used against you. You are actively engaging in your own demise, and you're doing it to own the libs. How stupid. How stupid. Anyway, if you want to show off your agreement with me that you believe conservatives are raging morons for even mentioning this idea, even having the gall to put it out there, not having the presence of mind to understand what they're doing after years and years and years of ring shall not be infringed, except for trans people, makes no sense to me at all. Exactly. They never get it. They never, ever, 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 ever get it. So I'm channeling my energy by making designs that, you know what I really love about this design? Like on the down low? No one knows whose side I'm on with this design, which is actually apt because I think both sides are stupid. I think that the gun control people are stupid. I also think that the anti-trans people are stupid. No, like literally no one knows whose side I'm on with this design. And there's so much there's reeing from both sides. I posted this design on Twitter earlier and I said something like, it's every trans person's God-given right to own an AR-15. And no one knew what to do with it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm having a little bit of a fun. I don't know if I'd like the background, the blue or the purple background better. Well, you can see, like, I mean, you can see what it looks like on purple. And if you want, I mean, if you want something different, let me know. I always leave it with the Unwoke Art Substack, which is unwokeart.substack.com, where you can see when I launch a new design in my Unwoke Art store. I always leave the comments open on this. So if you guys see a design that you like first of all, if you want to know when I add new Unwoke designs to the Unwoke Art Store, this is the Substack you want to subscribe to. You are not automatically subscribed to this by subscribing to my main one. This is just for people who want to see the designs that I'm making and maybe buy some stuff, maybe not too. Of course, buying stuff supports the work I'm doing, but if you just want to see the designs I'm making, that's totally fine. But the comments on every single post are open. And so if you see a design that you like and you're like, Carlin, I would really like that on a mug, or Carlin, can you do this with a different background color? Or Carlin, can you add this color hoodie because I really want it? I can't guarantee that I can do what you want me to do, but like I can certainly look into it. And if you leave a comment and let me know what you're looking for, then I will be more than open to giving it a try. Cooley says, my hoodie, my hoodie that says, horrors don't get cold came in today. I love hoodies. I love that, Cooley. Thank you for sharing. All right, guys. Well, that is all the preamble I have today. And let's dig into it, shall we? And let me just get this set up. Again, guys, we are going to be watching testimony from the Texas hearing that happened on Monday about oh shit, hang on. You guys can't see. There was a pop-up that just came up. I gotta get a different screen. Hang on. Not that. That. There we go. This is testimony for the bill in Texas that would ban trans surgery in minors. Now, the angle on this video is going to be a little unfortunate. So we're not going to get to see the faces of the people who are actually testifying, but we will get to see the faces of the lawmakers. So, and this is just what is on the website for the Texas House of Representatives. So that's what we're going to do. And let me just get someone up here so we can actually confirm that there's sound.
Committee substitute, as substitute committee members that have witnesses we are not able to hear today. Any Texas resident is welcome to offer their comments on the portal.
There's no closed captions, just so you know.
Is able to view the comments.
So I know that a lot of times you guys like me to do closed captioning. You might be able to turn it on your live stream on my channel. I think it can do it in real time. But I don't have the option to show closed captions on here. So that's just going to be the way it goes.
As they are posted. The comments will be posted and available on each bill's webpage after the.
Fast forwarding so we can get to the
The chair
action.
calls up House Bill 1106 as pending business. The chair offers up a complete committee. The
No,
chair hears none. Amount of
no.
questions.
Sorry, I gotta find. I probably should have queued this up before, but I didn't realize they were doing other stuff too.
Okay, we're going to begin our public testimony.
Yay!
The chair calls Nora Belcher.
Good morning.
State your name, who you represent, and your position on the measure.
Certainly. Good morning, members. Chair Click, Representative Price, I'm Nora Belcher, CEO of the Texas eHealth Alliance. I want to thank you for giving me just a minute today to talk about why House Bill 1771
wrong
got
bill.
on our radar and why it's important.
Wrong bill. Not the right bill.
Association offices supported by our association delivered on compact states. Then
I'm trying to find the bill that we're actually interested in,
Mr. Schaefer, thank you for being here. I
which
showed
is
that you were with the Council of
1686.
State Governments, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Which bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'd like to express my appreciation for your consideration of the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact. For
No.
the record, my name is Matt Schaefer.
Not
I
it.
very much appreciate that.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Visiting camp daycares would be typically between 50 and 100 camp.
No.
Healthcare system to reduce the number of mothers dying.
No.
Dorian and Wynn Johnson were born with mucolipidosis type 2.
Is it possible that
under
it's
the
just in part
umbrella
two?
State or whatever, every insurance company, or even states where the Medicaid system will pay for transition.
There it is.
Sure.
Found it. Found it. We found it. Committee stands at ease, so that means they're coming back. Okay. There, look at that. We just rolled through 4 hours of testimony. How great.
And members of the committee for allowing me to lay out House Bill 1686
There it
for
is.
you today.
Thank
House
you.
Bill 1686 prohibits healthcare providers from performing procedures and providing certain medical treatments for the purposes of gender transitioning, gender reassignment, or gender dysphoria for children. Multiple systematic reviews say there is no high-quality scientific evidence that hormone therapies, puberty blockers, or surgery help children overcome gender dysphoria or lower the risk of suicide. Despite that, no evidence exists or that the evidence that is cited is of low quality or very low quality. Multiple American medical organizations have consistently advocated for these treatments as being standard of care. In addition, there is meaningful evidence that children are being physically and emotionally harmed by unintended consequences, side effects, and change of heart that sometimes occurs after the initiation of hormone therapy and puberty blockers. Members, those of you that were on this committee last session remember hearing a similar measure where we were told that the effects of all of these medications are reversible. We knew then that that was not true, and in fact, science has now caught up and has acknowledged that much of what happens to an adolescent who is treated with hormone therapy or puberty blockers, and certainly surgery, is irreversible. Without conclusive, high-quality evidence, doctors engaging in gender transitioning young people are effectively experimenting on children and, unfortunately, oftentimes preying on the fears of confused parents. For many years, professional counseling has been a proven alternative that helps girls and boys overcome dysphoria, depression, anxiety disorders, and in fact, scientifically remains the most effective treatment for adolescent gender dysphoria. I want to be clear, it is my belief that parents are often put in difficult positions when presented with a situation where a doctor and a mental health professional are recommending the prescription of puberty blockers and hormone treatments for the purposes of changing a child's birth gender, or else the child will commit suicide. This is an unenviable and no-win position. It is not, unfortunately, fortunately, it is not supported by scientific fact. But it is a situation which many parents have found themselves in. And so I want to be clear that this is why House Bill 1686 addresses a prohibition on the medical and surgical treatment in children and does not criminalize parents. I would also add that this bill contains a broad list of exemptions for which for treatments of genetic conditions which are medically verifiable, where there might be a situation where a child has ambiguous genitalia or an intersex condition or some sort of antibody or hormonal imbalance, which is inborn and would prevent the normal development of secondary sexual characteristics and gender and sex. And as we hear testimony today, I would ask each of my fellow committee members to consider asking critical questions regarding the quality of scientific evidence being presented, and specifically, if folks could cite the author, journal, and year of the publication. I would like to reserve my right to close, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Questions, members, Representative Tinderholt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Oliverson, for bringing this bill. You and I have talked, and I'm honored that you have this bill, and I know it's can't be a good situation for anyone that's even considering this, and I think all of us will keep that in mind as we go through this. But I first wanted to say thank you for bringing this bill. And I also told you I had a few questions, so I'm going to ask those questions early. Was there any consideration to making a civil cause of action similar to what we did last session with the heartbeat bill?
That was certainly talked about, Representative, but I think that the appropriate venue for regulating this is through the Medical Board and the Medical Practice Act, as it turns out that the real dysfunction here is the lack of convincing high-quality scientific evidence and a general unwillingness of the medical community to self-police and self-regulate on this issue. And so that is the reason why we're doing this.
Can we just pause for a second and talk about how effed up it is that the medical community refuses to self-regulate themselves on this? I mean, how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids are they going to hurt, permanently alter, because they refused to do the right thing? It's unconscionable what the medical community has done. Truly and sincerely unconscionable.
That's the direction that we elected to take.
Thank you. I have a couple of concerns that parents, and I don't see anything in the bill, correct me if I'm wrong, parents may consult with medical professionals across state lines and have medication, specifically puberty blockers, sent into the state. Does this cover that at all?
Representative, unfortunately, or fortunately, we are the state of Texas, and so this bill contemplates the practice of medicine, the practice of healthcare in the state of Texas. And with respect to sort of Jeffersonian principles that we are founded on, we cannot, nor should we, entertain telling another state what to do, just as we would respectfully ask them not to tell us what to do.
And the other one is very similar. If someone's being counseled to do this with their child and then they bring them across state lines to execute the actual surgery, would this be similar answer?
This bill doesn't contemplate medical care received outside of the state of Texas.
So as I was learning more about this, I learned a lot about detransitioning and a lot of people that wanted to do it after they got older. Does the bill discuss anything about detransitioning and the fact that they were abused as minors, now they're adults attempting to detransition and heal from the harm done? does this even touch detransitioning at all, or is this just for the surgery itself, the initial surgeries and puberty blockers?
So Representative, I would look at this bill as being a preventive measure to preventing people from having to experience detransitioning. I think you're going to hear abundant testimony today from detransitioners who feel as though they were pushed into or forced into or coerced into or just basically given a bill of goods that ended up being inaccurate. That this would solve their problems, that their suicidal tendencies would resolve, and that they would be perfectly happy. And then unfortunately, they have woken up, in their late teens, early 20s, some of them earlier, and realized that this wasn't at all what it was said it would be. They are no better than they were, and in fact, they're much worse. And now they just want to get back to a place to where they could potentially reclaim some of what they were originally given when they were born. But medically and surgically, they are scarred permanently. So I would say, number one, this is a preventive measure to prevent folks from having to go through that again, because we recognize that a lot of these folks that are detransitioners.
So one of the things I want you guys to be paying attention to as we're watching this, and this guy, and I have to imagine that this is the guy that introduced the bill. He's giving such a thoughtful and calm argument for the bill. And if you hear an argument from him that you find compelling, that means that you can take those arguments and use them when people ask you the same thing. So what he's saying is, so why is it necessary to have a bill banning transition surgery for minors? Well, it's a preventative measure for detransitioning later, because a lot of them grow up to regret it when they're minors. And we could just prevent all of that. And sadly, if they go through with it when they're minors and they grow up to regret it, it's permanent. There are permanent scars. It can't be reversed. And so this is a preventative measure for preventing that suffering later. So I think we're going to hear a lot of good arguments that you all, when you're talking to people about this stuff, as I hope all of you are when you have the opportunity, because I do think that there's a lot of parents out there that still don't know this is happening, and they don't understand why stuff like this is necessary. And so please make sure that, like, every single one of you, if you're sitting here and you're watching committee testimony right now, that means you're one of the people that really understands this stuff on a much more cohesive basis than your average person. And that means you have an obligation to teach people what you learn and to spread the message, because the only way that this is going to stop is when more people start speaking up and more people start teaching other people what they know.
Are folks that began this treatment as adolescents, not people who began this treatment when they were adults. And in addition to that, I would say that there is other legislation out there looking at sort of the coverage of, or the requiring the system to provide healthcare benefits to detransitioners. I think it's a travesty that every state or whatever, every insurance company, there are even states where the Medicaid system will pay for transitioning. But as I think you'll hear from witnesses today, once they cross to the other side, not only will their doctors and therapists disown them and refuse to acknowledge that they exist, but they're left with no coverage, and everything that they have to do to try to get back to where they
That's the worst
started
part.
is out of their own pocket. And I think that's horrible.
That leads to my next couple of questions. I was going to ask if the bill requires insurance companies that paid for this to assist with detransitioning, and I think you answered the question that it's no. That's correct?
It's Representative. There is another bill on that, but it's beyond the scope of this bill.
What about statute of limitations? If someone had a surgery and say 15 or 20, I believe it's 2 years right now, but if it's 15, 20, 30 years later, does this cover that? Because sometimes it takes people a long time to realize that they really wanted to go back. This doesn't cover that either, correct?
That's right. Okay. And I'm certainly sensitive to what you're saying with regards, and I know there are other states and places where they have a different statute of limitations, and it may be maybe less challenging to bring a suit against somebody that you believe, scarred you for life.
And when it comes to that, and I just have two more questions. I don't want to monopolize, but one of the things was the economic cap. If there was something done that it's only 250,000, I'd like to work with you after this bill's done and see if there's any of these things we've talked about. But the last thing I want to ask is that I think we agree that counseling, professional psychological counseling with individuals, that there's a lot of value in it. But I have concern about therapists that try to psychologically transition these children to be the opposite sex. And what I mean by that is they might not be able to go do the surgery, but I fear that we may not be covering the medical professionals that are doing the psychiatric work and transitioning them
That's a
without
really good
doing the
point.
surgery. Does this cover
Because
that?
social transition fucks these kids up.
So this bill leaves open the idea that since mental health services and treatments have been shown repeatedly to be highly effective, there are multiple good studies out there that show that if a child is expressing gender dysphoria and they're provided with supportive counseling and therapy, that a vast majority of them will either resolve by the time they complete the second decade of life, or it will mature into same-sex attraction. Neither of which is a good situation to have transition to the opposite gender.
Well, you and I,
yeah.
You and I have talked, and I want to reiterate, I know this is sensitive. I thank you for bringing this bill. I can't thank you enough. This is one of the most important topics to me, and I think to a lot of members. And I know it's important on both sides to the people out there. So I know that we're going to be respectful to everybody today, and I can't thank you enough for bringing this bill forward, sir.
I appreciate you, Representative. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Representative Oliverson, or Dr. Oliverson, is gender dysphoria a true medical diagnosis and term?
So that's actually an important point, and I remember Gabs told us this in the community the other day. So the guy who brought this bill is a doctor. So he's going to be able to catch doctors when they're lying to him. He is a doctor, and so I think it makes it even more impressive that he was one of the people to bring this bill, because that couldn't have pleased other people.
I think that the concept is certainly something, but it unfortunately has become I would say it's become so expansive, so sort of pulled in many directions that I believe it to be an imprecise medical term.
Do you believe that there are physicians in Texas that are practicing gender affirming care or treating gender dysphoria in a true and accurate way?
Literally, no one said you were. Stop making shit up.
You don't think there's one physician in Texas?
I think that the ones that are prescribing hormones and puberty blockers and referring patients for surgery as adolescents are failing to follow the science entirely.
And so referring for surgery as adolescents, you're aware that that's not a standard of care and that there are not surgeries performed in adolescents.
That's actually incorrect, Representative.
Could you give us the citation as you asked for?
I can tell you that when we heard this bill last session in 2021, we received public testimony from a physician not in this very room, but in...
That bitch was actually like, they aren't performing surgery on minors, and that's a myth, and you're lying about that, right? Can you believe she had the gall to say that?
Where we normally meet, who testified under public testimony, that in fact we do mastectomies on girls under the age of 16. But then she added, but that's completely reversible.
Okay.
Of course, we all know that's not reversible. That's foolish to say that that's reversible.
And under your bill, mastectomies or cosmetic procedures would still be allowed for individuals as long as they're not claiming gender dysphoria.
Well, I think you have to distinguish whether or not we're removing normal, healthy anatomy or we're removing abnormal anatomy. And I think the example that gets thrown into the mix, which unfortunately is a mischaracterization, is a male adolescent with gynecomastia, which is an abnormal proliferation of breast tissue in an otherwise healthy boy. That is not a normal developmental condition.
Is cosmetic surgery considered to be removing abnormal tissue?
I'm sorry.
When you said that it's not happening unless it's abnormal, I'm trying to clarify. If somebody is getting.
I'm not
breast-
aware of a mastectomy being performed or any breast reduction surgery being performed on anyone under the age of 18 for anything other than abnormal anatomy, other than what's happening here.
In this circumstance, though, under your bill, it does not contemplate if somebody under the age of 18 with parental consent wishes to have cosmetic surgery.
Such as?
So let's say you have a young girl that has one breast that is larger than the other, and that is causing her discomfort or emotional
That's actually
concern,
normal, and it
or
will
she's
usually
getting
develop out of it.
ridiculed
Yeah.
in school,
That
and says
happens.
these do not match, and I want them to match. Under your bill, would they still be able to perform that surgery to correct the distinction between the two cup sizes in the two breasts?
Yes, that would be my understanding.
And so in that respect, surgery for that anatomy would still be allowed for a child that is claiming to have mental distress or concerns, as long as they're not expressing gender dysphoria.
I think that I think those are light years apart, honestly. I mean,
And the parents in those circumstances are participating in making those decisions. And one would be permitted under this bill, but the other would not, correct?
right. That's right.
Also, hormone therapy. The hormone treatment that is done can also be done for precocious puberty.
Actually, it's typically not done for precocious puberty. For precocious puberty, usually we prescribe puberty blocking drugs because it is an inappropriate expression of puberty. When you have a child that enters puberty before the appropriate age for puberty, there can be negative consequences to that, just as there would be for suppressing puberty at an appropriate stage where, you know, a child should be undergoing puberty and developing bone mass and continuing to have growth in the brain and the heart and other, you know, bodily systems.
And so in this circumstance, the same puberty blockers that you are indicating could still be prescribed by physicians in Texas.
Those
conditions like
conditions,
you just
yeah,
expressed.
there's a section in the bill, Representative, that specifically outlines a series of exemptions for the treatment of conditions that are medically verifiable genetic disorders, where there's an abnormal development. You know, puberty is not proceeding normally, or because of a chromosomal abnormality, a child may not ever have a normal expression of their sex assigned at birth.
And again, in those circumstances, so it's not a complaint over the surgical procedure, and it's not a complaint over the hormone because it's prescribed in other circumstances. The ban here is in circumstances where physicians in working with the families have determined that it's appropriate for gender dysphoria. That's the ban.
The ban is basically because, you know, has to do with conditions where the science is essentially inconclusive, poor quality at best. We have a growing list of harms that are being done. We have a growing list of people who have gone down this pathway because they were told it was going to solve all their problems, and now they're ruined.
And in that respect of science, in your term being inconclusive at best, as a governing body, would it be more appropriate for us to maybe put together a compilation of scientists, doctors, folks that we agree are experts within the field, and have them begin to do a study on the differing testimonies that we may hear today as to whether or not the efficacy is good for Texas public policy or not?
So, Representative, I contemplated that, but the reality is that that's already been done 5 times by countries
exactly.
around the world.
Why are we
that have
here?
far
What are we
better
doing? Why are we even
ability
having
at
this
gathering
conversation?
record keeping because of their national health services, have much better data to be able to analyze this, and also have had more experience farther along this pathway than we have. So I don't know what value we could possibly add by basically, you know, if 5 out of 5 systematic reviews agree that the evidence for this is lacking and that this is a poor standard of care that is leading to harm and that it doesn't confer any benefits in terms of reducing the risk of suicide or improving gender dysphoria, then I'm not sure what we could possibly add at this point.
If today we had a number of Texas physicians or even Texas medical associations and groups that were to come up to say that they have differing studies or opinions, would that maybe raise the question of whether or not it would be more appropriate for this body to do something like create a study?
Again, I would say that this issue has been looked at exhaustively by the greater scientific community. And so I don't anticipate that doctors in Texas are a microcosm that is completely insulated from the rest of the world.
But it would
This
be,
issue is a worldwide issue, right? And so I think that what's really disturbing to me is that a number of groups in America and a number of physicians in America have failed to pay attention to the multiple systematic reviews that have already been done and essentially either do their very best to silence or squelch out any dissenting scientific opinion, which is in and of itself non-scientific, or have completely just ignored the risks and the changing and evolving knowledge that we have on this subject.
and I guess my question from a policy perspective is, there are steps within our process and system by which we could do a study. If it is a slam dunk, as you say, then we may be back here in 2 years with the documentation to say, this is the right thing for us to do.
And in the meantime, how many kids are going to have had these surgeries that regret it? You want to wait 2 years for stuff that's already been done? That doesn't really seem like the party of kindness and empathy to me.
Doing a study is possible. I know that's not what you want to do, but I'm just asking, is it a step that this state could take?
I think it is certainly always a step that could be taken, but I don't think that it's a step. I think it's a waste of resources at this point. Again, I would ask you, what could we possibly add to the 5 comprehensive systematic reviews which have already been undertaken? I mean,
Well,
this is sort of like, yes, you can continue to do a study on gravity over and over again to prove that gravity still exists. You can always do that. But the question is, when 5 out of 5 comprehensive systematic reviews conclude the same thing, what value is there in doing a 6th?
we could also put together part of the medical board, put together a review. I know that's hard, maybe
didn't
because you
answer the
said there's not
question.
one good practicing doctor in Texas on this issue. But presumably, we could find medical personnel that are qualified and have them participate in coming up with a plan or a schedule by which would be, if you don't agree with today's current standard of care, an additional element or safeguards to not have what you claimed is experimenting and preying on fears of parents.
Yeah, and again, Representative, we can do all of those things, right? We could do nothing.
Could do those things.
We could just ignore the systematic reviews that are already out there. But again, my point is, this has been done. This has not been done once. This has been done fairly exhaustively. There's nothing for us to add.
Let me also ask about the uniqueness of intersex. This bill does not ban parents from making a decision early after birth and picking the gender of the child that is intersex.
Those would be medically verifiable genetic conditions associated, with an abnormality of normal development.
And in that circumstance, the parents often choose the gender, maybe because they were hoping for a girl or they had their grandfather's name picked out. But the parents get to choose the sex of the baby before the baby begins to identify maybe their leanings. Correct?
I think you'd have to talk to somebody that does that for a living. I know that
under your bill,
I know that there are certain conditions where it is easier for a child to be raised as one gender versus another. Let me give you an example. There's a condition called testicular feminization, where a child is born XY, 46XY, a boy. But because of an abnormality, the body is unable to receive the effects of testosterone being produced by the testicles. And so the body's external characteristics in the womb develop very much as a female. Now, you could make an argument that that child was born a boy and should be raised as a boy, but the reality is that child has genitalia, which is somewhat ambiguous, but probably leans a little bit more female. And their testes, although they're present, have undescended. There is no scrotum. And so it becomes, I think, in the judgment of most medical professionals, or maybe all of them, I don't know, that it is easier for that child to be identified as a girl simply because of the anatomical abnormalities that occurred in the womb and up until leading to birth. So I guess my point to you is that I think it's pretty rare to have a circumstance where it's literally 50-50 on either side, totally ambiguous. Can it happen? Yes. But what I think you'll find is a lot more common is a situation where the patient leans one way or the other. And so then that's an easy conversation.
In the sense that it's
So in other words, what I'm saying is let's sort of not get, I don't want to get into the weeds of the 1 in a million circumstances here.
Sure.
We have a much bigger population to deal with here.
We do. And in that circumstance where there's intersex and the doctors or the parents pick, it may not correspond with as that individual grows and the gender in which they identify. So you may pick that they should be a girl based on medical science, but they may feel as if they were male. Those children don't get to participate in that process, correct?
I think the more important question to ask here is how do they feel when they're 20, 21, 24?
Okay.
And I'm going to say to you that I think
This
a
guy's
major
really good.
problem that we have in this country with the science and the direction that medical organizations have gone in this country, which is not supported elsewhere in the world, by the way, is the fact that there's an overwhelming reliance on the child's internal perception of themselves at a young age when their mind has not fully matured.
Yeah.
And as you know, as a lawyer, we don't let kids sign consents for medical and surgical treatment. We don't let them vote. We don't let them drive. They can't even get tattoos. And so the thing is that is,
They're not supposed to.
well,
That happens quite a
it's
bit.
not lawful for them
You're right.
to do, right? So the thing is, what concerns me is the fact that this conversation seems to completely neglect the fact that an adolescent's perception of self is
Very
probably
good.
not the best reflection of who they'll be when they're 25. And I think that's what this bill attempts to address. That's why this bill sort of, it says what it says, but it's very silent about what a person can do once they reach the age of majority.
I too appreciate this medical discussion. And I also think you and I both appreciate each other's commitment to faith. And I hope that we can continue an honest discussion about what may be medically appropriate or not appropriate. But I can also say you may not remember the moment you found out you were straight. But I remember the moment I knew I was gay. And it's because society told me there was something wrong about me. If you haven't been a child
Bullshit.
in an adolescent state that knew, consider from some of us on the dais. Kids know. It's hard. And I hope that this state will find a way to make decisions that is compassionate.
I call bullshit. I'm sorry. I don't like doing this, but there is no way in this universe that this woman had the revelation that she was a lesbian when society announced that she was wrong. Do you know when she had the revelation that she was a lesbian? When she wanted to sleep with a girl. It wasn't when society told her that everything was wrong and bad about being a lesbian. It was when she knew she was attracted to women. That's when she realized she was a lesbian. Now, I'm not going to argue that in Texas, there may very well have been people that told her that that was wrong because, I'm sorry, there are a lot of people who don't like the gays in Texas. There just are. To this day, I'm sorry. I know everyone doesn't want to hear that truth, but that is the truth. So I'm not doubting that that happened, but it is not when she knew she was a lesbian.
Passionate. and is protecting of all
And
Texas children.
furthermore,
And I look-
hang on. Furthermore, she didn't discover that she was a lesbian in a society and in a school system that incentivized her to be a lesbian. That is, she wasn't going to get positive reinforcement and stunning and brave. Oh my God, you're amazing, and you know, all this stuff for coming out as a lesbian. That didn't happen when she came out as a lesbian. So again, I have no doubt that she probably got some negative feedback about it. But the difference today is that these kids are being socially incentivized to transition, because when they transition, they get all sorts of positive attention, they get all sorts of positive affirmation, everyone's taking care of them, everyone's nurturing them, they all of a sudden have a whole new friends group that wants to make sure that they're inclusive and all this stuff, so they really like having a trans person around. Like, there is a lot of social pressure and social incentivization to be able to, like, that kids are receiving nowadays that just wasn't the case when she came out as a lesbian.
Forward to continuing the dialogue.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Price.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairman Oliverson, thanks for bringing the bill. I wanted to ask you a quick question about
Another
some
great point. She didn't have to
references
permanently change her
medical
body.
studies
Exactly.
and how that's handled both domestically and in other countries, because I think we'll hear a lot of testimony today. I anticipate there'll be a lot of references to that throughout the day. We did last session, when this bill or similar bill was heard before the committee. Can you kind of set the stage, if you don't mind, to the extent you are familiar with maybe the differences between the studies conducted here and the way the issues you and Representative Johnson were just discussing are handled in the United States versus what that may look like in other countries who have studied these issues as well, and just kind of set the stage so that we can filter what we hear coming forward throughout the day?
Sure, I think that's a great question, and there's a lot of direction we can go with that. But I would say a couple of observations. I would say that by and large, at this point, European countries who have been down this pathway for longer than we have, in a more cohesive medical practice setting because of their single-payer health system, have one by one done a right about face and called for a moratorium on these treatments for adolescents. Not to say that they don't still provide care for folks who are transgender, but to say that we're no longer providing medicines and surgeries to change a child's gender.
No
and this
problem.
is born out of
Please
concern
mount the
that
like button
A,
if you appreciate it.
that the science supporting that this is a good thing is at best
I
of
do
very
actually
poor
have beer
quality.
downstairs, and I almost brought it up with me.
B, there
I
is
was
a
this close.
growing
I could
list
still.
of harms that are being recognized that weren't appreciated initially when the Dutch study came out. But now it is well known that there are things other than the development of secondary sexual characteristics that are occurring during puberty. And when you don't allow puberty to proceed normally, many of these it become issues later in life. And I think you're going to hear that from some people today who that is their life story, unfortunately. But generally speaking, from a scientific standpoint, I would say that, one of the problems that I have, and I think others have, many others have with the literature in this area, is that there are few, if any, randomized controlled trials. There's a lot of data that's being bandied about as if it's authoritative. But the reality is, you go back and you look at the methods and you find that it was a self-reporting survey, where essentially you self-selected a population that took the time to fill out the survey. And then you make all kinds of conclusions based on that. And friends, I got to tell you, that's literally the worst science of all. I mean, even as lawmakers, we would look at an internet poll and say, okay, is that a scientifically based thing? So, we're looking at very significant quality issues. And I would point out that even organizations in America like WPATH, have pointed out that many of their, quote, strong recommendations are based on studies that they self-identify as being of low or very low quality. So this is kind of, I don't want to say it's make it up as you go along. I don't think they're making it up as they go along. But it has evolved into somewhat of an echo chamber where there's a conscientious desire not to listen to dissenting scientific viewpoints and contrary information, and instead to just reinforce the narrative. And that's really problematic. And by the way, that is a compelling reason why this is good legislation, is you have a community of professionals that absolutely are unwilling to self-regulate. Thank you.
Representative Tinderholt.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I'd like to kind of get clarity on two things that I kind of glossed over quickly. And it's because it's things that I'd like to see, and I know we're going to work together. I think we agree that therapy for these children is very good versus the surgery. Would you agree with me that trying to psychologically transition these children is harmful to them, along with what the bill already covers?
Representative, there are studies out there that indicate that social transitioning is not a neutral act. And that children who are socially transitioned at a young age have a very, very low percentage of coming to terms with their biologic sex. So I think that, respectfully, I think there's obviously debate about that. I think the effects are a little less well understood than the effects of the medicines. I would tell you as a doc, it's always easier to track the outcomes of side effects that you can observe medically than things that you can observe from a mental health standpoint.
Would you
Those are
say that
always
it's
harder.
harmful to do that, though, to try to psychologically transition a child?
Well, as I said, I would say that these are not neutral acts.
Okay. And then I believe this, and I believe that transitioning a child at the ages that they're being done should be considered child abuse. Would you agree with that?
Well, Representative, I think part of the problem here is that, and I feel very passionately about this, and I want to let everybody know who's listening to this and everybody in the room that I know for a fact, because I've visited with them, I know there are many families where this was a decision that was sort of dumped in their lap, and they were given a false dichotomy choice between it's either this or suicide. And I don't think that's fair. The science doesn't support that. It is unconscionable to me that a licensed healthcare provider would put a parent.
I want to clip this. I'm sorry, guys. I want to go back and just clip this. What is being said here is really important, and this is a really nuanced view. And listen, I have been just as guilty as anyone in engaging in the hyperbole by saying anyone that allows this sort of thing is engaging in child abuse. But this guy is making a really good and fair point, which is that for a lot of parents who have allowed their kids to have gender transition surgery as minors, they are being told by the doctors that if they don't allow their kids to do this, their kids are going to commit suicide. So it really is kind of like an emotional hostage taking situation. And I think that we need to allow for I think that we just need to have a little bit more empathy for parents who have been put in this position, because like until you've been in their shoes and you've sat in a doctor's office, and remember, this may be a doctor that they have that this family has gone to their entire lives. So imagine you and I'm sure like many of you have kids, so I'm sure you can imagine this. Like you have a kid, you have this doctor that you've been through, like every single doctor's appointment that your kid has ever had has been with this doctor. You trust this doctor implicitly. This doctor has never steered you wrong. 14, 15 years after you have this kid, and every single appointment you've ever had with this doctor tells you if you do not allow your child to have this surgery, they are going to kill themselves. I think it's very easy for people who have never been in that position to say that you absolutely would not allow it under any circumstances and these parents are engaging in child abuse. But I think when you're actually in the circumstance, it's probably a lot different. And this is, again, someone you've trusted to care for your child throughout their entire life. And so I just want to go back and I just want to clip this bit because I want to put it on the internet. So just give me a sec. Let me see. We are at 4:18. Just going to go back a little bit. I'm going to get my clippy clip up. And thank you for your patience, guys, and allowing me to do this because it makes it a lot easier for me later. I don't have to go back and find it.
As a doc, it's always easier to track the outcomes of side effects that you can observe medically than things that you can observe from a mental health standpoint.
Would you
Those are
say
always
that it's
harder.
harmful to do that, though, to try to psychologically transition a child?
Well, as I said, I would say that these are not neutral acts.
Okay. And then I believe this, and I believe that transitioning a child at the ages that they're being done should be considered child abuse. Would you agree with that?
Well, Representative, I think part of the problem here is that, and I feel very passionately about this, and I want to let everybody know who's listening to this and everybody in the room that I know for a fact, because I've visited with them, I know there are many families where this was a decision that was sort of dumped in their lap and they were given a false dichotomy choice between it's either this or suicide. And I don't think that's fair. The science doesn't support that. It is unconscionable to me that a licensed healthcare provider would put a parent in that position. But I think unless you can figure out how to unwind all of the harm that's already been done to parents by the medical community with regards to moving their children down this pathway, then I don't think that's a reasonable thing to propose.
So what about for the medical professional? Because I'm hearing the same things when I talk to people that were transitioned, that they were literally, and I think we'll hear about it today, that they were literally told, do you want to have a dead child or do you want to have a child of the opposite sex? Would you think that it should be child abuse for the medical professionals that are doing it?
Well, I don't know about child abuse, but I would just say, Representative, that that it would fall below the standard of care for medical practice and it would cost them their license forever and all time when this becomes law.
Thank you for answering my question, sir.
Oh, God, that was so good. That was so satisfying.
Representative Collier? Representative Jones?
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Dr. Oliverson. I just have a couple of questions, not only as a lawmaker, but as someone who represents and has worked in the LGBTQ community for the totality of my adult career. And I have just a couple of questions. Speaking of reinforcing a narrative, I have heard about several of the randomized trials that you've been speaking about. Could you specifically, where are those trials, from? Because Rep. Johnson mentioned a couple of the need for a study, especially as you mentioned the need, there are quality issues, particularly as it relates to Texans. And what I've heard a lot of is the narratives of things that are happening in other countries, the use of witnesses from other states. And I'd really like to hear about how are we having this conversation for Texans and utilizing
This
what
guy
Texans
really feels like
are
people in
recommending?
Texas are
Because we
somehow
have
medically
several of the
different than
medical
every other state
associations
or
that have
country.
spoke against what this bill is trying to do, and still it is being framed as those professionals do not know what they're talking about, that parents are having this decision dumped into their laps. And I'd really like to clear that up and really see where the science is going for Texans, not for people from other states or research from other countries.
Because people from other states are
Well,
biologically
Representative said a
different.
lot, but let me just say in response, so I think it's important so what I was talking about are systematic reviews, not randomized controlled trials. And I'm not trying to be to quibble, but it's an important difference that I want to clarify. So a randomized controlled trial is a prospective study where you establish a control group and a treatment group, and you basically blind the observer and the treaters to which group is which. So essentially, some will get the treatment, some will get a placebo, right? And you will observe an effect, and you will see if there's a statistically significant difference between the two groups that could be accounted for by the treatment. The trick in doing that is that you have to design the study in a way, and you have to have an adequate control group, and you have to actually account for any and all potentially confounding variables that could come in. Anything from background, demographics, mental health status, it's everything else has to be completely equal for the study to be valid. A systematic review, which is what I'm talking about, is more where we actually look at the entirety of medical evidence across the board, all studies on a subject.
That's right.
And we analyze that, and we analyze that in several different ways. We analyze the quality of the study. It's important to know that all studies are not created equal. If I gave everybody in this room a magic pill, and half the people in this room said that they felt better, and half the people said that they didn't feel better, that does not a study make.
That's right.
Right? So, I mean, there needs to be a proper method. So part of a systematic review is that, particularly when there's confusion in science, a systematic review helps sort out what different conclusions from different studies say, and it helps weight the results of those studies based on the reliability, based on their methods, the sample size. How good is the data?
That's right.
I know you got data that says that this is beneficial or it's not beneficial, but how good is that data really?
Right.
So that's what a systematic review is. So to your question, so there have been the ones that I'm aware of are most recently Florida has done a systematic review. But before that, I think the one that everybody probably can easily remember comes from the Cass report, which was the UK, where they basically shut down their child gender modification clinic after that report was published, because the systematic review essentially says what I told you, basically, right? But in addition to that, I think the other ones are Sweden, Finland, and Norway. So these are all countries where, you talked about social issues and biases and things like that, and I want to be sensitive.
Hang on. So William is asking, is this live? This is not live. This was on Monday. So not quite live. I'm live, but the testimony is not live. But we're watching it anyway, as though it is.
Sensitive to that. So in these Scandinavian countries, this is something that's been looked at for a lot longer than in the United States. And so that to me is important when they can say, well, we're farther down this pathway than you guys, and we have now looked at this in a comprehensive,
I appreciate that too,
dispassionate
Gayla.
way, and we've concluded that this is not good practice of medicine. So we're saying no more.
Okay. And thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And so as a follow-up to that, are you saying, particularly those who have mentioned favorable outcomes to services and healthcare for transgender youth, that there's not enough data to back up those outcomes that are being reported, or if they exist at all?
I think there's data out there, Representative. The problem is that the data is is very conflicted, and the quality of the studies that everybody's sort of holding up as the gold standard is of very low quality. They're not good randomized controlled trials.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, members? Representative Jones.
So
Here we
are
go.
you saying there's
Here we go.
no such thing as gender dysphoria?
There we, yep,
No,
there it
I'm
is. You
not
can
saying
tell
that,
just the body
Representative. I want to be
language.
clear. I
Right
think
here,
that
just on the
that's
corner.
a real condition.
You could tell.
I'm just arguing that medical and surgical treatments of adolescents is an inappropriate treatment, and it's an inappropriate time frame for these things, for this.
So I'm just thinking about how, like in family court, and when parents are fighting over their kids, I mean, at a certain age, when they're a minor, the courts let the kids decide which parent they want to be with, or they heavily
Not
consider it.
quite
So
the
I do
same
know
thing.
that in legal settings, they do allow children to make very important decisions about their lives. Along those same lines, I heard you.
Can we all just agree in the chat that a child making a decision between whether to live with mom or dad is not exactly the same thing as a child making a decision to cut off their breasts permanently with never being able to fix it? Because if a child chooses to go live with dad over mom and then rethinks that decision later, there is, I would presume, a way to move the child from one house to the other. But slightly different when we're talking about cutting off perfectly good body parts.
You say that and if I'm wrong, correct me, please, that if a trans kid is suicidal, basically that some grown-up convinced them that they were like suicidal. Did I hear that right, or I did not hear that right?
I don't think that's what I said.
Okay, because I can think back to this case where I represented a trans woman in criminal court. And when I talked to her mom to try to find mitigating testimony, her mom said when she was in pre-K, when they lined the kids up, and this was before social media, so this trans woman didn't have the internet telling her that she could be something that she wasn't born as. But when she was in pre-K and the teachers lined up the kids to go to the restroom, they put the boys in this line and they put the girls in this line. She always got in the girl line. And so the teacher said something to mom about, well, can you tell him he needs to get in the boy line? And it didn't matter how much mom said, you need to get in the boy line. She always got in the girl line. And of course, she grew up to be a trans woman. And one of the things that she suffered from when she got older, and I don't know that they knew about gender affirming care back then, is that there were all these things that ended up happening to her body because there wasn't gender affirming care, and everybody kept trying to tell her she was a boy. And I know she had attempted suicide because I talked to her mom. She had been hospitalized for that. So I guess my question is there ever, under your bill, is there ever a legitimate diagnosis of gender dysphoria that would allow surgery or gender affirming care of a minor? Because in her instance, she knew as a pre-K kid that she was a girl. And then along those lines, if your answer is no to that, then why are we putting the kids who may not know, or like who maybe didn't want to, they were wrong when they were younger? Why are we putting them above the kids who are right when they're younger? And if I need to explain that, I'll try to do better.
I'm going to do the best I can to answer your question. I would say, let's see. You actually said a lot, so I'm trying to think out how to package this.
So did you.
So I think part of the issue here with regards to the diagnosis of pediatric gender dysphoria is that we do know there are studies that are, seem to indicate that given supportive therapy, that a large percentage of these children either come to terms with their biologic sex or they become gay. And so the reality is that I think what I have not seen and what I don't think that the science is very good about right now is figuring out who's who. And I think I don't want to take from their testimony, but I would just ask you to, there's people on all sides of this issue, right? But we have a number of folks here who the science got it wrong for them. And I think the most important thing that we have to contemplate as we hear this is that none of this is reversible. And if you guess wrong, and a child goes through several years of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, they're not going to get back to square one ever. And so were that the case, were it completely reversible, this might be a slightly different conversation, but it isn't. And the more we learn about this, the more we realize that the secondary effects and consequences of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers go far beyond just secondary sexual characteristics of the opposite gender.
So if we are on the side of what you say, your argument makes sense. But if you are on the side of they were right? The kids were right. They knew exactly who they were. And they end up growing up and they're not given gender affirming care and they're not given hormones. And now all of a sudden you have a woman who has secondary, I believe your words were secondary effects where she can't even, she doesn't look like a woman. She doesn't feel like a woman because you denied her access to stuff when she could have blocked it. And so I guess my question is, why is the one subset of people more important than the other subset of people?
Well, I think the first rule of healthcare is first do no harm, right? And I'm going to throw one more little piece of data out there for you to contemplate, because I think it relates to what you just said, and that is that the former president of WPATH, who's one of the world's leading surgeons as far as this, transition surgery, recently said that this epidemic of childhood puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones is actually making it harder to do gender conforming surgeries. So I know people would think that, well, if I start these treatments when I'm young, then I'm going to conform better to the gender that I want to be. So the impetus is get it started as young as possible. But what I'm saying to you is that the surgical community is coming back now and saying that it's actually the opposite, that it's actually much more likely to be successful if you do end up doing gender conforming surgery on somebody who's actually transitioning as an adult than if they had never gone through puberty normally. There's just not I don't want to get into kind of the, gross anatomics, but basically what she's saying is that there's just not enough to work with.
Well, so I'm going to respectfully disagree with you because you could have dueling experts up here all day. And I'm just trying to figure out why your experts are better than my experts or.
Well, I mean, it's just like a statement of fact, isn't it? It's not like, I mean, it is a fact that doctors who perform this surgery on minors have stated there's not enough to work with. That is just a fact. There's no, Liza Jean, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. I really do appreciate it. Yes, that happened to Jazz Jennings. That quite literally happened to Jazz Jennings on national television. There's nothing to disagree with. That happened.
The people that you're seeking to represent are more important than the people that I and others like me are seeking to represent. That's because innately, that means that we're treating a certain class of citizens like second-class citizens. And I don't think we should be doing that in the state of Texas, but I won't go back and forth with you. I just wanted to
Appreciate
have that discussion. Thanks.
And I appreciate your viewpoint. And I do hope that everybody here listens to whatever, all the different perspectives that are presented today, because I think that part of the issue that we've had in this debate has been an unwillingness to hear the whole conversation. So I just want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard too.
I agree, because I believe some people are have an unwillingness to listen to my side of the argument. But so that's, can go the same, thanks.
Any other questions, members? All righty, Dr. Alverson will reserve your right to close and begin hearing public testimony. Chair calls Quentin Van Meter, followed by Jessica Zwiener, and then Alan Hopewell. Good afternoon, Dr. Van Meter. I show that you are with the American College of Pediatricians, and you're representing them and yourself. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you are for the bill?
I'm for the bill, yes.
All righty, thank you. Please begin your testimony.
First, I want to apologize for my telephone ringing in the midst of this august event because I had assumed I turned it off carefully and it somehow escaped that. So my apologies to everyone in the committee and to you, Madam Chairman. I'm here in support of the bill as a pediatric endocrinologist, as the immediate past president of the American College of Pediatricians, which is a professional organization of board-certified pediatricians who feel very strongly about the need for following what has now become the best set of guidelines internationally and including in the United States. The whole premise of gender identity comes from a history of Professor John Money back in the 1970s, and I happened to have been a student of his and was at that time dismayed at his lack of scientific process and in consultation with the parents and obtaining consent. So he experimented on children, and because he did that and things came out badly, Johns Hopkins basically closed his programs in the late 80s. I said, no more. This has been bad for these children. It's bad for our reputation to have done things that are outside the realm of good and ethical science. In 1993, I came across my very first transgender patient who was then referred to as transsexual. And it was a young man who was born a biologic male. And he decided that he had been born in the wrong body, and he felt very strongly about that. His family was a military family who'd moved frequently. And they came to Georgia, where I practice, and sought out my opinion of what we should do to help this young man transition. And this was just 30 years ago. There wasn't a single pediatric endocrinologist in this country who had ever had a case like that or who could give me any advice. I went to all of my senior mentors from north to south and east to west, and they scratched their heads and said, we've never seen this before. It's something very unusual. We could possibly advise you on what to put together in the way of a treatment protocol. That was just 30 years ago. If we have these kids that have been living these lives all these years, as the affirmation advocates would say, where were they living and why did they not appear? They didn't kill themselves. We didn't have suicide rates of 3% of our population of children taking their lives all the way through those years. So this is something that's new. It's more of a social contagion that has happened, and the internet has been quite responsible for that. Gender dysphoria is real. It's real suffering. The patients that come to me with gender dysphoria are in pain. They're in a severe emotional pain. But if you look at the big picture, if you look at the Tavistock Clinic in England, when they looked at the kids that were in waiting for treatment, and they had long waiting lists, 0.3% of those children killed themselves. But 0.3% of the children who transitioned killed themselves. This is real hard data that you cannot refute. So the touted suicide rate of 41% that's used to scare parents and scare the kids themselves is artificial and profoundly dishonest, and is causing the parents who want their child to live. There's nothing more that you would do as a parent. I'm a parent of 4 adult children, and I now have 5, almost 6 grandchildren. And if something was, I was told they would kill themselves, I would do everything I could possibly do. The thing to do, the thing that works, the thing that is the standard, should be the standard, is to counsel them through all of the things that they've been suffering with that brought them to that point. Why would they want to take their lives? And as Walt Heyer, a very well-known detransitioner, when he sees these kids, he says to them, Why do you not want to be the sex you were born? What is wrong? What scares you about that? And he gets an answer just by being very direct. There is a reason these kids want to be somebody else than who they were born biologically. And we need to address where that came from and help heal the wounds which are there beneath the surface. And in doing so, really do the best for these children.
Questions, members?
I do.
Representative Tinderholt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir, for being here today. We appreciate you. So it sounds like you agree that mental health assistance is probably one of the most important things that we can do for these children and potentially the parents. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, and allowing them to go through puberty. Puberty is a curative process. It is it's painful. Everyone in this room has probably gone through puberty, I would guess, and remembers acne and teeth that were too big and hair that was curly when you wanted it to be straight, and not being accepted by your peers because of some physical appearance or sense of who you were. And that teaches you lessons of life. And with the family support, helping through that, and the psychological support, if necessary, to work in the underlying anxiety and depression, you power through this period of time and you end up as a reproductive adult.
So what do you think about medical professionals that are mental health professionals that are transitioning the individual without doing the surgery piece? The ones that are affirming and saying that it's okay and it's okay that you feel that way, and trying to help them transition just short of doing the surgery?
There's a danger in allowing yourself to give the impression that there is no problem beneath the surface. And, giving the child pronouns and letting them dress and act in the manner of the opposite sex gives that child the sense that they are something different than they really are. They're not accepting who they are.
Do you think it's harmful?
It is harmful because it tears apart the fabric of the family. It tears apart the friendships, that when a child comes out and comes to school the next day as the opposite sex and is treated as such, that can't be put back together. It's a Pandora's box. And Dr. Kenneth Zucker, who is really the world's expert in this, has written extensively on the harms of doing a social transition. It is not reversible. You cannot put the lid back on that. Once the child does that, if they come through therapy and they realize that they realign with their biologic sex, they have friends who will never talk to them again. That circle of friends is gone. It causes the child to seek friends, and the place they seek those friends is on the internet. And it's a dangerous, unregulated place, which is very shiny and exciting and draws them further into the pathway of medical and surgical transition.
In your experience, and I know you do the medical side, but in your experience, do you think that someone should be held accountable for actual abusing the child? Because I look at that it's child abuse. Do you look at it that way at all?
I look at it as doing harm to the child. And from a physician standpoint, the thing that drives my ethical and moral compass is doing no harm. You weigh the harms and you weigh the benefits, and you see what's going on. So chemotherapy in patients with cancer, who it will take their life, and you have a way to allow them to live, perhaps infertile because of the nature of the drugs, perhaps other disabilities that come along, but thriving in other ways. That's a different circumstance. There are statistics to show that there is more mortality that comes from that. The mortality in the transgender community is hyperinflated and used as a weapon.
So I'm going to ask you a simple question. I think you're going to be able to answer very easily. What's a woman?
A woman is a reproductive person who produces ova and from the ovaries. And that is the biologic job of that person to procreate.
And so if someone wants to do what people are calling transition, can someone that's a male transition and become a female, or can a female transition and become a male, or is it more that they try to look like that?
It is the appearance and the social role. You cannot take a biologic male and transfer that person to a biologic female. It's an impossibility, and vice versa for males.
And so what I'm hearing from you over this, I don't want to put words in your mouth. is that what's happening right now is unhealthy.
Yes, I would say so.
Thank you, sir.
They're transitioning to fit a social role.
Other questions, members?
So
Representative
reinforcing
Alverson?
stereotypes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Van Meter, appreciate you being here. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the medications and treatments. You are a pediatric endocrinologist, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, which I think is important because I know we'll probably have other pediatric endocrinologists that may testify differently. And so I want to make sure that we have this opportunity to get your perspective as a fellow pediatric endocrinologist on some of these things. So with respect to the puberty blockers, let's talk about those first. Obviously, there are certain medical conditions where giving a drug that would essentially for the block puberty, that there are medical conditions where that would be appropriate, that we've treated for a long time, like precocious puberty, right?
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about, so that I know there are a lot of non-medical people in here, but from your perspective as a pediatric endocrinologist, how is precocious puberty different than normal puberty? And why is it appropriate medically to give a puberty blocking drug to a child who has precocious puberty as opposed to somebody who's just experiencing natal puberty at the normal age?
Well, it primarily has to do with preservation of height potential. And you might say, well, wow, is that really that important to the child? But there are cases where when puberty starts early enough, the female patient, and it's a ratio of almost 3 to 1 precocious puberty in females versus males, it ends up shortening their height below ability to reach countertops and drive in a car without being in a car seat. So you're trying to preserve their height potential that's there, that you know from the midparental target height. Also, it's very difficult for socially for a second grade female to be menstruating regularly. There's nobody in the classroom really, essentially no other individuals. And it's something that they can't handle the hygiene. They don't understand it necessarily. It becomes something where they feel like a pariah because they have to excuse themselves from the room. They have to do things that they're distinctly different, and they suffer emotionally because of that.
So when we give a child a puberty blocking drug who has precocious puberty, I know folks want to say, well, we give these drugs to kids with precocious puberty all the time and the effects are totally reversible. And so it's reasonable to conclude that if we just block normal puberty for a period of time, that's totally reversible too. Is that your expert opinion?
No, because it has to do with the timing and the length of time and what happens on the pathway. If you start puberty blockers for the precocious puberty, there is a limited time frame where you cease the treatment and let the child's system.
How many kids actually have this precocious puberty thing? Like, I would imagine it's like not that many. Am I wrong about that?
Kind of wake back up at a time when their peers are basically getting to that stage of puberty. So you bring them in socially into an environment where they have no sense that they're different than their peers, which is important for them to do that. But it also allows the body not to have any circumstances that does things that they're not reversible. Now, in the timing of normal puberty, that is to say, after the age of 8 in females and after the age of 9 in boys, early puberty creates some challenges, but nowhere near the challenges that happen to children with true precocious puberty. But if you start blocking puberty in boys at a normal time, the average age for boys is 11 years and 6 months.
You're welcome.
The average age for girls is 10 years and six months, with some variations with very ethnic populations, but very close to that range. If you start blocking puberty, you are stopping the physiologic process of maturation from an infertile individual to a fertile individual. And along the way, all the body systems are preparing for be able to be a fertile adult, to create the gonads, create the gametes, and then fertilization process occurs. The brain is very dependent on puberty it's expecting the hormones of the natal sex to be able to develop. And if that doesn't happen, there's a period of blockage that development that we don't know. We have no idea if that can be recouped. There's no evaluation of that anywhere. Okay. So you talk about doing some studies and maybe doing studies here in Texas. You would have to really do that over a period of about
Thank you,
20,
James Jones. I
25 or
appreciate
30
it.
years before you brought that in as a standard healthcare procedure and knew it was safe and effective. You really can't jump in and do all the treatments in advance and like you're anticipating that you're going to get the result you wanted, because we don't know what happens to the brain if that can be recouped. We do know in precocious puberty that the original study group now has been followed for about 25 years, and fertility is okay. There aren't any birth defects. There aren't any increases in cancers. So those things that we didn't want to have happen at a very young age have been able to happen in those kids. The thing that has been there under the surface is the emotional ability and worsening of anxiety and depression, which we've seen in our kids with blocking puberty, even in the precocious puberty kids. So there are various types of these puberty blockers that are short-term that last just a month, some that last 3 months, some that last 6 months, and some that last a year or two. And so if you have a child that you're treating,
They're doing a
many
great
times we'll
job.
start with a shorter acting one, a 3-month product, because if the child suddenly has incredible anxiety and depression, we have an opportunity to cease that treatment and let that resolve. If you use a much longer acting 1 and 2 year, like the implants of puberty blockers, you're stuck unless you pull that implant out, which is not easy to do.
So, well, let me ask you this. So, I was reading, and it's been a while since I did my endocrinology rotation in medical school, but I remember reading that there are certain medications that you can give that actually suppress the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, where the body is now incapable of manufacturing its own sex hormones. Do we see that when we give the puberty blocking drugs for long enough, or if we start administering cross-sex hormones? Does that actually, you talked about infertility, but can you actually destroy the body's ability to manufacture its own hormones if you do this for long enough?
It takes a while to wake up. There are, again, no studies to know that we have not looked at that. We really look very closely at that population of adolescent females who have significant delay of puberty. Those girls who don't menstruate by the age of 15, 16, and 17. We are very concerned about their bone mineral density, accretion of calcium into the skeleton, which occurs up to age 25. There is a window where that can happen. And when you take out the years in the adolescent and take away estrogen from a female, you are irreparably damaging the skeleton. And that's pretty, even the affirmation advocates will agree, well, yeah, there is some diminished bone density. It's real. We do not know. We're not following those kids out to menopause to find out if they have severe osteoporosis and fractures as a result of that.
I remember reading somewhere, it was one of the studies I looked at that said that it's also the case that male to female adolescents, those that are transitioning from boy to girl who are on cross-sex hormones, also develop osteoporosis at a pretty young age. Is that true?
That is also true.
So they'll continue to have problems maybe later in life with premature fracturing of bones and even their spine.
We don't know. It's just like theorizing on the side that says I think it's going to be safe and okay.
Yeah,
it's theorizing really to say that you can prove that will be an issue because no one has looked at that.
Okay, and in your opinion, as a pediatric endocrinologist, you've looked over the literature, I take it, as far as this whole area of the gender medicine and sort of what's going on and stuff like that. Is that you have looked? Yeah, I'm assuming you know it quite well. So would it be your contention that American medical organizations in the promulgation of gender affirming care, are they following the best science in terms of that practice?
they're not following the science. If you go back and look at the root place where this body of information comes from, it starts with the Dutch protocol, which began in about 2000 in the Netherlands, where they took children specifically, not adults, but children, and put them through a longitudinal pathway. Again, it was open-ended. They based it on what they thought would be a benefit. Okay, that's the blocking of puberty comes from the concept of an adult psychologist who said, all of my adult patients complained that they wished they had not gone through puberty so that their body would not have changed. Much like the Representative Jones mentioned, he said that that's their wish. That's the adult people said, gosh, if I had just not had my shoulders broad, or I hadn't had a lot of facial hair, or whatever it happened to be that makes it difficult for them to have the persona of the opposite sex in appearance. That was the nidus of, well, let's try it. I mean, that's as deep science as it was. That's a theory. Let's try this. This is back to what John Money did back in the days in the 70s. So that protocol now has been opened up.
Thank you for sharing that
people
illustration.
getting information about every bit of data. And it turns out that it's a sham. The whole basis, the Dutch protocol, did not improve mental health at all, did not improve it in any way, shape, or form. Patients were excluded from their patient population because they didn't do well. You cannot do a study.
Wow.
When you
Wow. I just want to call out what was just said. So in the study, they're talking about if the patient didn't do well, they were removed from the study. You can't do that. That's not how it works. If you have someone that starts the study, unless they self-select themselves out and say, I don't want to participate anymore, you can't just remove people from a study because they're not giving you the results that you want. That is grossly unethical.
you drop out the losers and the ones that were harmed, and you don't count those in your data bank.
It was like everyone that was lost to follow-up
Lost to follow-up.
carved out. So,
Right, so
they stopped coming for their puberty blockers, and so then we just carved them out. So
right, if you can't really do a controlled trial on this, because if you did a controlled trial with an institutional review board, which is a group of independent folks who have nothing to do with financially or socially or with the people that are doing the study, they are truly independent. They would not allow a study to be done, a controlled study where there is any potential for sterilization. It just wouldn't happen, because these children, when they go through the whole process, are sterilized. And so they wouldn't even allow a study to be done because it would be not ethical. They would know that the kids couldn't consent. The parents could not really consent to on the behalf of their child to say that they want no sexual function whatsoever. They will never have intercourse. They will never have orgasms. They will never have the secretions that their natural body organs would do, because they can't create that surgically. They can't replace that or make that happen. They have costume pieces of body parts that are created very, very beautifully with plastic surgery that leaves scars behind on other parts of the body where they take tissue to create the new organ systems. But it doesn't work. The artificial vagina doesn't secrete lubrication naturally. It doesn't have the sensation that the vaginal structures and the clitoris has. The artificial penis has no erectile function unless it's pumped up artificially, and it has no sensitivity.
Hang on, we got a super chat. Thank you, Nick, for that. Rigging a study to reach a preferred conclusion. That's exactly right. Jesus Christ. Wait, what are you guys trying to get me to clip? The study thing? Is it the study thing or something else? Did I miss something? Sorry, there's just a delay and I want to make sure I didn't miss something before I continue. The study thing, I'll get the study thing another time. Don't worry about it.
To achieve an orgasm in a standard fashion. So it basically makes them sexually dysfunctional. And that's the thing where the harm comes from, is that you're creating a dysfunctional, asexual individual who doesn't understand the pleasures of an intimate sexual relationship with whomever. same sex or not.
And I guess, I think one of the things that troubles me as I've, really done a deep dive into this and looked at it, kind
Can we just all take a moment to just pause? So what this doctor just said, and we talked about this on the stream the other day when I was talking about Jazz Jennings too, is that when you perform bottom surgery on these kids, they can quite literally never in their life achieve orgasm. They never achieve orgasm. Can't do it anymore, ever. They have to go their entire lives never knowing what that type of intimacy is like. He said they basically become asexual. So here's what I want to say. Can we just marvel at the fact that we are quite literally in a reality in which conservatives are the advocates for children being able to, have functional sexual relationships with whoever they want. And Democrats are the ones that are completely okay with denying kids the ability to ever have a functional sexual relationship. I just find that to be a little ironic, sad, sick, and twisted, but also just a little ironic. And I think we need to take our ironies where we can.
of with what you said is that if it were the case that 99% of people who express gender dysphoria as adolescents
Well, we'll look for you if we get that far.
persisted in that gender dysphoria,
I'm glad you gave
whether we
testimony.
treated
Thank you
them
for
or
that.
not, that they would essentially be
If there's anything else you'd like to tell us about what it was like to be there or things that we should look out for, I don't know that we'll get to your part today because we still have a bunch of ways to go, and as you know, it's very long. But if there's anything that you kind of like noticed about the day, I would love to hear your thoughts about it in the chat, and I'll display them on the screen if you want to give us more information.
be adults with gender dysphoria until such time as they get the conforming, whatever it is, therapy that they need. They're going to be unhappy. But isn't it the case that a majority of these folks that are given supportive therapy and no medicalization end up either coming to terms with their birth sex or expressing same-sex attraction? And what you described is a situation where we create an individual who is dysfunctional in terms of intimate relationships and the ability to have those meaningful, intimate relationships with another person. And like I said, if it were the case that, the vast majority of them, that was essentially their best life, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. Am I just reading that wrong, or is that your contention?
No, I agree with what you're saying. So I actually think it harms the gay community because it takes away sexual function. If that person is going to resolve their gender dysphoria and identify as same-sex attracted, that person will not have a sex life. It is forever damaged, and that is something that I don't think a 6 or 7 year old or a 12 or 13-year-old or a 15-year-old can wrap their head around.
Okay. Just a couple more quick questions. I'm sure we're going to hear
Yeah.
some of these medical organizations.
She's the black woman, right? Oh yeah. I saw her earlier when she was like gearing up, and she basically said that this is the same woman, right, that said that gender transition surgery is no different than asking the kid if they want to live with mom or dad during the divorce. Yeah, she had an attitude. You could tell from here. Thank you though.
That are all for the gender affirming model or whatever we're calling it. I guess my question to you is that with respect to what we know about the science that's out there and what we've seen with the systematic reviews that have been done, does the positions put forth by the various medical organizations in this country comport with the rest of the world and the medical knowledge that's known and what's going, or are they kind of out on an island by themselves?
Well, they're working on an island, and it's a very closed community. You mentioned doing a study in Texas, Representative Johnson, and I would say that if you could get the transgender clinics here in the state of Texas to open their books to a wide review of a panel of people from the whole spectrum of gender therapies, from pure counseling to pure medical and surgical intervention, and open up so that there's transparency of every child that comes in, where they're accounted for, what happened to them, if they dropped out, why they dropped out, if they are having psychological problems along the way. We have seen the fabric tear open in St. Louis at the Washington University.
Yeah, we have.
And that has shown what's going on behind the veneer of wonderful happiness on the outside. I cannot get information from gender clinics for patients that come to me for a second opinion. I am not welcome to the data. I'm not allowed to know what's gone on. It is very secretive. And I don't know why there would be secret stuff that my colleagues wouldn't share with me unless they were hiding something specifically. And
That's
so
a really good question.
it's very hard. There is no dialogue. We ask over and over and over again in the professional societies to which I belong, the Endocrine Society, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, will you open a dialogue with people on all sides of this issue in front of the membership and let them listen to dialogue back and forth? You present your side, I present my side, you bring up a study. If I have concerns about that, I would like to express the concerns about the validity of the study and why. You have the same right to question opinions that other people might have that are opposite of yours, but there is no opportunity for that to happen. None whatsoever.
Are you telling me that a rigorous scientific organization that holds itself up, which I'm sure we'll hear about in the course of this conversation today, as being authoritative and scientific, refuses to have an honest intellectual debate on a topic because they don't want to have that conversation?
That's very true. I have attended webinars for the Pediatric Endocrine Society, to which I belong for almost all my professional endocrine life. And I pose questions in a chat room where you can raise our hand and ask questions. All of my questions are uniformly ignored as if they never happened.
I think that's probably the most deeply disturbing thing I've heard. I mean, science, by definition, is supposed to be able to withstand scrutiny and challenge, right? I mean,
that's correct.
That is the whole fundamental basis of the scientific method, is the knowledge that whatever it is that we claim and assert to be true and valid, factual, is provable through repeated observation by multiple different reviewers.
They're abandoning all
approaching the
scientific
issue the same
principles.
way. And what you're telling me is that there are these same organizations which are going to tell us what we should do in Texas that claim to be authoritative have literally silenced debate on this issue and refuse to debate the issue in a scientific manner. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. I have applied and registered for the Pediatric Endocrine Society annual meeting in San Diego in May. In the application process, for the very first time, there is a disclaimer that I have to check and sign and agree that if I show any disrespect, whatever that means, to any individual who is presenting, I will be expelled from the society and immediately removed by security from the premises.
Oh my God.
I had to check it's never been there before. And this year it is.
So if you just disagree.
This is a cult.
You say, I think those conclusions are not valid. Somebody might say that you're disrespecting them and you have to be removed from the meeting.
I assume that's what that's about.
That's crazy.
It's never been there before, and it's there now.
That jeopardizes the entirety of the scientific method, in my opinion.
And I would agree with you 100%.
Well, Dr. Van Meter, I know you had to travel a ways to get here, and we're truly grateful to you for being here and for being courageous and standing up and telling us your side of the story. We certainly want to hear all sides, and so we're grateful for your expertise, and I just thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Jones. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chairwoman. You were just highlighted for your expertise, and you are the same Dr. Quentin Van Meter who around 2020 was actually rejected by Texas court under a Dober standard of not having expertise in gender-affirming care. Is that correct?
No, it was specifically not having any expertise in puberty blockers.
So you were rejected by Texas court under the legal standard of Dober of whether or not you were an expert in puberty
Trying to discredit
blockers,
him.
correct?
I was rejected, but there was a very complex circumstance with a lot of problems with the plaintiff's attorney, who basically the judge was made so angry at so many points that I had references with me in the courtroom, and the judge looked at me and said, if you don't know those references by heart, you may not present them and go to your briefcase to get them. So it was a very uncomfortable circumstance. But I have subsequently in the state of Missouri been held as an expert witness and other court cases since then.
But you have been rejected as an expert in
Rejected in that
Texas.
particular courtroom.
Thank you very much. You are also part of the American Academy or American College of Pediatrics, correct?
College of Pediatricians.
And the American College of Pediatricians is different from the American Academy of Pediatricians, correct?
That's correct.
The American College of Pediatricians, of which you're a part of, has about less than 1,000 pediatricians as part of your membership.
That's correct.
And the American Academy of Pediatricians has 67,000 members, correct?
That's correct.
Is it you or your organization that have pushed for conversion therapy in the past?
No conversion therapy has ever been suggested.
You have not been one who has advocated for conversion therapy in the past?
Conversion therapy is a very pejorative, invented term that says anything that is done that would allow the patient to resolve their emotional issues and go a direction of mental health. That's banned as conversion therapy. And the American College stands firmly that there should be an ability for somebody who wishes to resolve their emotional issues about either their same-sex attraction or their gender identity, that it should be allowed the counseling. And counseling should not be banned, as it has been banned in 20 states.
Hang on, Soren, who was there and testified, says all she did was disassociate through my testimony. She was there, but her eyes glazed over. That must have been. I mean, okay, so I'm curious, like how did that feel as someone who came to give testimony? And I don't know what perspective you were giving testimony from, but like, how did that feel to you that you came there to give testimony on a really contentious issue, and an elected representative, you could visibly see that their eyes just glazed over and they weren't even listening? I mean, I was actually thinking about this as we were watching this. I wasn't talking about it, but like, one of the reasons I just don't involve myself with politicians at all anymore is I find them to all be so incredibly disingenuous that I can't put on the face I need to put on to be able to interact with these people, because I just find them to be reprehensible, to be quite honest.
District of Columbia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. In your
So Soren says it felt awful. She had already made her mind up. I testified neutrally, super nuanced and empathetic. She didn't care. Elected representative. And Representative Jones walked right out as I began to talk. Collier got up in the middle of it. Wow, that was nice of them. That was very kind and empathetic and open-minded of them and inclusive.
You stated that your recognition as an expert in part is your presentation for Teens for Truth Conference, countering the LGBT agenda, as part of the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Texas.
I was invited to speak.
Okay. And in addition, your organization has also said that you've called homosexual relationships promiscuous, a danger to children, unstable, and you've claimed that the LGBTQ people's experience results in shortened lifespans.
And the statistics are there. That is the life expectancy of transgender is 50% of the general population.
It's not just transgender, but you've also called out homosexual lifestyle as being a danger to children.
We have recognized some of the risks that are associated with it, that are not associated with heterosexual relationships.
All right. Thank you so much.
Representative Jones.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. Based on what was just raised, I do have a couple of questions concerning your work with trans youth. One, have you ever treated transgender youth, or would consider yourself an expert on adolescent medicine for trans youth?
I'm not an adolescent specialist specifically. Okay. I'm not a board certified adolescent, but I am a pediatric endocrinologist and a pediatrician, and those issues are part of the purview of the folks that I treat. I have a very large stable of diabetic patients who are adolescents.
Very helpful. And so my next question, you've mentioned about the hyperinflated suicide rates for transgender individuals. Where did that data come from, particularly if that's not your practice?
The Tavistock data.
Okay.
I mean, that's profoundly, 0.3% is way different than 41%.
Okay.
Now, the Williams Institute, which is a very strong advocate from UCLA organization, has clearly shown that suicide ideation, not completion, is about 20% of the population of autistic children, children with anxiety, children with depression, and children with gender dysphoria. That's their data, and that's not completed suicides. That is suicidal ideation. So that organization already brings the suicide myth down considerably to the equal with people who are struggling with mental health issues abroad.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Representative Jones.
Here we go. Here we go.
Going back to Delbert, so I'm going to tell non-lawyers what Delbert is, because people might not understand why that's significant. With Delbert, if somebody comes in, somebody says, I call this expert, the courts have to determine whether somebody is really an expert. And so Delbert puts you through rigorous standards to find out if you're actually an expert. So if the courts in Texas say you're not an expert, you're not an expert. It doesn't matter what you say. And that's in all areas of expertise. So one thing I want to explain to people who are not lawyers. So I'm gay. I'm lesbian. So in fact, I'm the first Black openly lesbian person in the Texas State House. The Texas
I'm very proud of
legislature.
herself for that.
So should I be able to adopt kids? Because I've heard you don't believe that people like me should be able to adopt kids.
We took issue with the idea that kids that were adopted by same-sex parents were better off, not statistically significant, but better off than children raised in an intact parent, heterosexual family, functional family with both biologic parents.
So I'm a single mom.
Right.
So I guess if I'm a single mom, I can't be a parent either. But I want to get back to my question. Should I be able to adopt kids as a gay person?
I have no issue with that.
Oh, okay. All right.
The point is that to claim science, this is what the American Academy of Pediatrics did, is they
Hang on. So we're not going to get through the full video today. We might do some tomorrow, but Soren, do you have other things on your channel that you want to plug related to this issue? Let people know. And happy to have people go over and support the work you're doing as well. And if there's anything that I can help you do to spread the word about this, please let me know. You can find me here. I'll put my email in the chat so you can see. Oh, she don't have any other things, but I'm just gonna put my email in the chat. So I'm actively unwoke@gmail.com. And if there is ever anything I can do to help you, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
claimed science showed a better outcome for children who are raised in same-sex families.
Thanks for sharing.
That was an issue that the American College of Pediatricians said, why is the American Academy of Pediatrics choosing to say that when their data is not based on any science, it's based on anecdotal reports? I take care of kids in my endocrine.
Yeah, but I don't want to know that. That's not what I asked. I just asked if I could adopt or not. So just hold on for a second, because I want to hurry up and get through.
Sure.
Right. So I'm asking some very direct questions. So you also don't think I want to be curious, because I think that bias matters when listening to some.
Yes, bias does matter indeed.
So do you think I should be able to marry as a gay person? Because I hear you don't believe I should be able to marry. I just want to know if that's accurate.
The issue is not whether you should be able to marry, but is that proven to be of any harm in any way to the children that would be in that family? It's a preservation of the family unit. And this is not against single moms. This is why the American Academy of Pediatrics will not touch single moms, because they do not want to offend or harm or hurt anybody who is in circumstances that they could not control.
But my question isn't about whether if I'm gay and I'm married, if it's affecting kids. I don't have kids. for purposes of this question, should I be able to marry?
It is your choice.
I-
You said it's your choice.
And I've also heard, because again, I just want perspective in considering your testimony. Should I be able to have an abortion? Because I hear you don't think I should be able to have an abortion.
My personal conviction is to do no harm, and the developing conceptus from the moment of conception is a human being.
So that means that I shouldn't be able to have an abortion.
Doesn't mean that at all. It's my personal opinion about whether or not we should do harm to individuals. That's all it's based on. And decisions, these are things that are done in states. The states decide what they are going to do, and God bless them. If that's the law of the state, that's the law of the state, and you're allowed to do the things that are within the purview of the state in which you live. So, I mean, I'm just saying, what's my personal opinion on the sanctity of life is that life is absolutely precious from the moment of conception till the last natural breath.
I believe the sanctity of my life matters as well, but thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Alderson.
I think that he would have
Thank you, Madam
agreed
Chair.
with
And
that
I apologize
as
for
well.
double dipping, but I felt like I kind of need to refocus us here a little bit. So Dr. Van Meter, I understand you're not you're a member of the American College of Pediatricians, and the AAP is. Are you a member of the AAP, by the way, as well?
No, I left.
Did you leave the AAP?
I did.
That's interesting, because I will tell you that less than a quarter of physicians licensed in the state of Texas are members of the American Medical Association, and their membership year over year is dropping.
So just to give you guys some perspective about what it means to be a member of these organizations, I used to be a member of the American Psychological Association for a lot of years, and what a membership in the and I'm just going to posit it that it's the same with all of them. What being a member of one of these associations means, it means you get like a magazine or a journal every month that gives you research. It means you have access to the organization for like resources or events or things like that mostly amount to networking. It means you might get a discount on the organization's annual conference. It means you get to put in your LinkedIn bio, I'm a member of the American Psychological Association, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It really doesn't. You also have to follow the biggest thing about being a member in these organizations is they all have ethical codes that you have to follow. And like you can get in trouble and get kicked out of the organization if you don't follow the ethical code. But like again, it doesn't really. There are some places that like won't hire you unless you're a member of these organizations, but that's really the only, I guess, benefit. And it was never like I stopped being a member of the American Psychological Association mostly because I wasn't getting anything out of it and it didn't mean anything. And it really just meant that I had to pay them like hundreds of dollars worth of dues every year and I wasn't using it. And so there was no point. And so I'm pretty sure it's the same with most of these organizations. You pay them money. In return, you get to say you're a member of that organization and you get like a magazine or something every once in a while. And that's pretty much it. That's what we're talking about. Now, these organizations, a lot of them also are the accrediting bodies for colleges and universities to be able to get licensed once you graduate. And that's really functionally the only purpose that they serve. Yeah, basically like a union. That's basically it. It's kind of a scam. It is.
By about 10% per year. So it's not unheard of, and I certainly wouldn't want someone to try to say that you're not qualified to be here on the basis of the fact that you left a professional society with which you had irreconcilable differences and moved to another. So that's one thing. Number two thing is, do any of these organizations establish your board certification? In other words, does the American Academy of Pediatrics, are they essentially the board certification organization for pediatricians?
Currently, they are not.
Okay,
And
yeah,
that
because
is,
that's the same for anesthesiologists too. We have the American Society of Anesthesiologists, which is an advocacy group and a professional organization for anesthesiologists to come together and discuss issues of anesthesiology. They are not, however, the arbiters of whether somebody has attained the medical knowledge as a qualified expert in a particular subspecialty of medicine. That would be up to the board. And so I guess are you board certified? I think you said you are, right?
I'm board certified in pediatrics and pediatric endocrinology.
So is pediatric endocrinology a separate board certification from pediatrics?
It's a sub-board, it's a completely separate.
So you had to go to residency for pediatrics, then you had to do a fellowship in, do you have to do pediatric endocrinology or is it endocrinology and then pediatric endocrinology?
It's pediatrics first and then pediatric endocrinology. That
Okay.
doesn't have to be that way, but that's the most standard.
Okay. All right. So, and obviously, so I think what I was hoping we would spend most of our time talking about today is, science and data driven. So I guess my statement to you is it seems to me as though from the standpoint of organizations in healthcare that are responsible for determining whether or not you have achieved an appropriate level of medical knowledge, you have passed your boards. You are board certified. And I'm not sure that a court really has any role in determining whether a doctor has passed their boards or is qualified or certified.
In addition,
I'm not a lawyer, but that doesn't make sense.
The company that makes one of the puberty blockers has used me as a principal investigator in their clinical studies of puberty blockers.
Yeah.
And they have their own standards of what they would accept in terms of expertise. And I was accepted by, the
Yeah. And I mean, look, I'm just going to be honest, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I would trust the American Board of Pediatrics and the American Board of Pediatric Endocrinology light years more so than I would trust a judge in Texas to determine whether somebody's a medical expert. I mean, these are the medical experts, right? That are basically.
I agree.
Did your board certification? Mine was basically I had to pass a written exam and then I actually had to have an oral examination where experts in the field literally could ask me any question under the sun related to the practice of anesthesia, and I had to be able to answer it. Here's a case, doctor. What would you do? Well, here's what I would do, right? I mean, it's not like it's just you sort of cut out something on the back of the cereal box and fill it out and turn it in, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And for the record, your position that life begins at conception and ends at natural death is, I'm a physician and I share that exact same position. So there's at least two of us in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Jones.
In case there was a mishearing or misunderstanding about what I said, courts do not determine whether you've passed your boards. What judges do determine when people call in experts so that people can figure out the ultimate issue in a case, if someone holds himself out to be an expert, there are certain standards that they have to prove in court to determine whether they're an expert or not. So if you show the court and the defense and the plaintiffs get to put on evidence to show whether they think the person is an expert or not. And so courts determine that. So to the extent somebody thought I said they determine whether you pass the boards, that is not what I said. In court, is very important to make sure that evidence that is given from experts is reliable and is based on sound science. And that is what the Daubert standard is, and that is what judges do, and they do it all of the time. Thank you.
Other questions, members? Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. The chair calls Jessica Zwiener. Good afternoon. I show that your name is Jessica Zwiener, and you're here representing yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're against the measure?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Please proceed.
My name is Jessica Zwiener. I'm a board certified endocrinologist in private practice in Houston. I specialize in initiating and managing hormone therapy for transgender adolescents and adults. I'm speaking today in opposition of this bill. Medical care for transgender youth is life-saving. Transgender youth are at increased risk of a host of mental issues such as depression, anxiety, or suicidal ideation. The treatment of gender dysphoria is transition. This has been established over years. There are very few interventions for youth that are as effective at reducing depression, anxiety, and suicidality as transition.
Dr. Sweeney, could you get a little closer to the microphone, please? Thank you.
I'd like to start by explaining the process of how we diagnose gender dysphoria and the stages of medical transition. The diagnosis of dysphoria is a very slow, methodical process. Many children do experiment with cross-gender behavior. This is a normal part of child development. For most of these kids, cross-gender behavior is transient. It's a behavior, not an identity. For example, a little boy who wears his sister's hair bows on and off for a couple of weeks, but never has any desire to be a girl. This is not dysphoria. This is not what we're treating. These children generally grow up to be adults who are not transgender. Other children, however, exhibit cross-gender behavior that is insistent, consistent, and persistent. For example, a boy who refuses to wear any clothing other than dresses, who insists repeatedly that he is a girl, and who refuses to cut.
Are these doctors aware that, like, there are a lot of girls who don't want to wear dresses, and just because you're a girl doesn't mean that you run around every day demanding to wear a dress? In fact, a lot of girls actively rebel against wearing dresses because they don't like them.
His hair. If this behavior persists, the child is more likely to be transgender. But this diagnosis cannot be made until the child has been consistent in this behavior for 6 months at minimum. The families of these children generally seek out psychological evaluation at this point. Most parents are not familiar with gender dysphoria, and they need professional guidance to make sure they're doing the best thing for their kids. At this stage, a psychologist's job is to evaluate the child's overall mental health, to determine if they have any other mental health conditions, and to determine whether the child has gender dysphoria. Before puberty, there are no medical interventions to treat gender dysphoria. None. There are no medications, no surgeries. Nothing medical is ever done until the onset of puberty at the absolute earliest. Before puberty, a child is supported as they explore their gender identity. They are not pressured to be one gender or the other. We're not trying to push kids to be transgender. We just want them to figure out who they are. Some children decide to transition socially. Social transition involves choosing a new name and changing their outward appearance to match their desired gender. This is completely reversible. Some children choose to socially transition at school. Some only transition at home. The process is different for every family. It proceeds at the child's pace. Children generally remain under the care of a psychologist for ongoing support and evaluation. Once puberty starts, medical treatment may be considered in consultation with an interdisciplinary treatment team consisting of physicians and mental health professionals. Reversible puberty suppression, or puberty blockers, are an option for some transgender youth. These medications are safe and reversible. They've been used for 40 years in cisgender kids with precocious puberty. They've been used for about 20 years in transgender children. These medications temporarily stop puberty, putting the child back into a prepubertal state. Once the blockers are stopped, puberty resumes. Puberty suppression is used to buy time for the child, the family, and the treatment team to be absolutely sure of the diagnosis prior to starting hormones, while avoiding irreversible and undesired physical changes associated with going through the wrong puberty. Puberty blockers have been shown to significantly improve the mental health of the transgender children who are lucky enough to have access to them. Some children do experience some adverse effects from blockers. These are generally minimal. They are outweighed by the massive improvement in mental health that we see. Once the adolescent is older, hormone therapy with estrogen or testosterone may be started after discussion with the child, the parents, the physician, and the psychologist. The goal of hormone therapy is to develop the secondary sex characteristics of the chosen sex. For example, for a transgender adolescent girl to develop breasts, or for a transgender adolescent boy to grow facial hair. This rarely happens before age 16. Hormone therapy is safe. Initial doses are low. They're increased slowly over a period of time until the blood levels of testosterone or estrogen arrive at the normal range for their desired gender. Surgery for minors is not the standard of care. Medical interventions are the most effective treatment we have to
If the-
alleviate gender dysphoria. We have
If surgeries for minors are not the standard of care, then why would there be any need to have a hearing like this? I mean, I suppose you could argue that they're trying to ban puberty blockers and that stuff too. Okay, fine. But like, if it wasn't happening, then why would this even be necessary?
plenty of studies about that, which we can get into later. But these treatment decisions are complex and they're made by parents, they're made by the adolescent in a methodical, thoughtful manner in consultation with an interdisciplinary treatment team of doctors
Definitely
and
never
psychologists.
because a doctor
Treatment is
tells
slow
them
and
that their
steady.
kids are going to kill
At no
themselves if
point in
they
the
don't.
process is treatment rushed. Patients are never
Definitely
pressured to
not.
start hormones or have surgeries.
Never happened.
Multiple specialists are always involved. Just as with every other treatment in medicine, it's important to weigh the risks and benefits of treatment against the risks and benefits.
This woman's voice is annoying me to no end. It's like, it's that smug, arrogant condescending, like, I don't even know why we're having this conversation right now. We are a team of experts and we will tell you exactly what you need to know about your child. And everything we do is safe and methodical and there's not a single thing wrong with it. And I don't even know why we're even here right now. Why are we even having this conversation? Because as you know, we are the experts and you should be listening to everything that we say. And never mind all those other people or the detransitioners who will tell you that I'm lying and full of shit because ha 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 that we are the experts.
Benefits of not providing treatment for this medical condition. I work with transgender youth and adults every day in my clinical practice. I see firsthand the enormous impact that these treatments make in the lives of individual patients. After exhaustive reviews of the medical literature, every major medical society in this country has endorsed this care. For these reasons, I urge you to all oppose this bill.
Get her. Get her.
Questions, members?
Get her.
Representative
Get her.
Jones?
Thank you so much, Dr. Joyner. One thing I want to ask, if you could please speak into the mic. Thank you.
Will do.
Could you talk about your experiences providing healthcare to youth, including youth who will be impacted by this legislation?
Yes, I take care of a number of adolescents as well as adults in my practice. One thing that I think is missing from this debate that we're not seeing a lot of, we focus a lot on the possible harms, on is bone density going to be a little bit affected or something like that. We're not hearing much from the kid. We're not hearing as much from the kids themselves or their families about the enormous impact to kids' mental health. And that is something that I really do want to focus on. I see a lot of children who come in with depression, with anxiety, who their parents are concerned about them. They have withdrawn socially. They're not doing well in school. They're spiraling. They're kind of falling apart. Once they start hormones, many of these kids come back to themselves. Their parents talk about how happy they are to have their kids back. I take a lot of children off of antidepressants because they don't need them any longer. The kids, once they have been able to access these treatments, they're able to just be normal kids without having to think about gender all the time. And it's very gratifying to see.
Thank you. Next question is, how do you feel this legislation will harm the patients that you serve?
I think I'm going to see a lot of mental health issues. Since the legislature's been in session, I've seen a lot of mental health issues already. Patients are scared. They know that these treatments have been very important in maintaining their health and their mental health. I spend a lot of time listening to people try to figure out if they need to leave the state or not. And I'm really concerned how I'm going to face these patients and tell them, we've seen how important and how impactful this therapy's been for you, but now you can't have it anymore.
Gotcha. And my last question, what is a common misconception of the clearly false information that is surrounding the conversations around the need for this legislation?
There's a lot. I think that the proponents of this bill are worried about, genital mutilation of children. I hear that all the time. No one is touching these kids' genitals. There's not surgery done on minors.
That's not true.
I'm sure we can find
literally
occasional
happened on
exceptions in
national
extreme cases of
television.
dysphoria if children are self-mutilating or something like that. But in general, it's not something that's done. Medical interventions are never done before puberty. And
Wrong.
There's no need to protect the 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds who are not affected by any of these treatments.
Thank you so much.
I don't know. I truly, I do not understand how these people can be taken seriously at all when there is quite literally a reality TV show that has been airing for 8 seasons on TLC that quite literally followed a child that was put on puberty blockers and started transitioning when they were 2 years old, all the way up through bottom surgery when they were 17, and is still following them today, with them breaking down on the TV and saying, I don't even know why our genitals matter, and I never feel like myself. It's like she is quite literally denying the existence of a reality TV show that has been seen by millions of people for 8 effing seasons. I just don't even know why we're talking about this. Of course, this surgery is never performed on minors, except in the most extreme possible like that reality TV show. That's one of those extreme possible circumstances, right?
Representative Tinderholt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today.
Get her.
What kind of doctor did you say you are?
I'm an endocrinologist.
Okay. And do you teach at all?
I have residents and med students who rotate through my clinic, but I don't teach.
Where is that at?
UT Houston.
So it's a state-funded school?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not representing them today.
Okay. When you first started, you said when someone has gender dysphoria, you very casually, and I don't know if it was that I could barely hear you, but you kind of casually said, and the answer is transition. Do you really believe the answer is just always transition?
I believe that in many cases, the answer is transition. I don't believe that that's always the case, but I believe it's important
Well,
to
she doesn't make any
listen to the
money if
child
people
or
don't
the adolescent,
transition, you know?
help them work through any mental health issues they have, help them
No
figure
transition,
out the
no
risks and benefits of
beach
social
house.
transition and medical transition.
No transition, no new
But
car.
in my experience, it's almost always the answer.
So I'm going to read you a couple of definitions. One is a state of unease
Ask her what is
or
a woman.
dissatisfaction.
Please ask her what is a woman.
The other is holding false beliefs about reality despite evidence to the contrary. Which of those do you think is dysphoria?
Can you say the first one again?
State of unease or dissatisfaction, or holding false beliefs about reality despite evidence to the contrary.
I don't think either one of those appropriately characterizes dysphoria.
So when you look up dysphoria, which the word is used everywhere all the time, and you look it up several places, the generic definition is unease or dissatisfaction. When you look up delusional, it's holding false beliefs about reality. I think that the medical profession is using the wrong term, because when someone has delusional issues, it's okay. We get them medical assistance. You just said that you talked to the child. So if the child thinks there's something that they're not, make it up, whatever you want it to be. I would think that as a medical professional, I could be wrong, that you would say, we need to go get that individual mental health assistance because they're in their mind, they have an altered reality. It's what we do. It is what we do in America. We go help people if they need mental health assistance. So in what world has it become okay to block puberty for children, and then as they get older to permanently disfigure? We're going to hear from people that were permanently disfigured as children. So you would say that this is not child abuse, am I correct?
I would absolutely say that this is not child abuse. Gender dysphoria is a recognized medical condition. If a kid comes in and says that they're, I don't know, a horse or something, that's not something that happens commonly enough that we...
Would you do surgery?
If a kid said they were a horse, I would not do surgery.
Like I don't know, because...
May I finish?
Absolutely.
Gender dysphoria is a recognized medical condition. Transgender people have existed in all societies
for
all
thousands
throughout
of
time.
years.
This is not anything new. This is not brand new. We have a treatment that helps these kids have normal mental health outcomes. Kids who are supported by their families and communities and have access to appropriate medical care, they have the same mental health outcomes as their cisgender peers. The goal of treatment for me is not to have a kid who says they're cisgender. It's to have a kid who is happy and functional and able to be a human, a functioning adult without having to think about gender all the time.
I'd like to ask you the same thing I asked the other doctor. What's a woman?
Aha.
It sounds like an easy question, but it's a complicated question.
It's not a
Explain. Tell me
complicated
the
question.
complicated answer.
Okay, so when we look at biological sex, most people fall into male or female. There's multiple different ways to determine what sex you are. We look at chromosomes, we look at internal sexual organs, we look at external genitalia, we look at hormone levels, we look at various different genetic abnormalities, we look at gender identity, lots of different things. For most of us, those things line up. We call that cisgender. Some folks, they don't line up.
No. I asked you about sex. What's a woman? That's a sex, not a gender.
Well, I
There's a
think
difference.
our last expert said that a woman was somebody who produces ova. That definition is very limited.
But you're combining.
It
gender
is.
and
That's the whole
sex in
point.
your medical-
Now I'm
The whole point of a definition is that it's limited. A definition, by very definition of being a definition, is limiting something. If you are not limiting something in a definition, then you are quite literally saying that everything is included. That is the whole point of a definition. Congratulations, doctor. You got it.
talking about sex. A woman is not just somebody who produces ova. What about the woman with androgen insensitivity who is genetically XY and doesn't have ovaries, but feels like she's a woman, looks like she's a woman, doesn't
What
realize
percentage is that? What percentage of the population is that?
it's not common. I don't know what the
So let's
percentage is.
just use the regular, everyday,
Mhm.
run-of-the-mill. What's a woman? You say
I
it's complex. Let me tell you, I'm retired from the Army. I'm not going to claim to be the smartest guy in the room, but I can tell you what a woman is all day long, and I can tell you what a man is. My 4-year-old son can tell you what a man and a woman is, and so can my 6-year-old daughter. Yet you're a medical professional telling me it's complicated. And then you're the one that is doing these surgeries to children.
I'm not doing any surgeries.
Well, then you're using puberty blockers. Am I wrong?
I use hormones.
Okay. But you can't define a man or a woman, but my 4 and 6-year-old can all day long. They don't even have to talk about XY chromosomes and double 2X chromosomes. They don't have to talk about that. But I have a medical professional that's gone to school for probably at least 12 years and done residency for 4 is my guess. And you can't define it. And that concerns the heck out of me. Can a man have a baby?
Yes.
Please explain that one to me.
There are plenty of transgender men out there.
I said, can a man have a baby? A man.
Yes, a transgender man who feels like a man in his brain, who has taken testosterone, who looks like a man externally, who occupies a male role in society, who is treated as a man, whose driver's license says that he is male. These people sometimes
Well,
have
the
babies.
DMV is, of course, the ultimate arbiters of these things.
I gave you what delusional versus dysphoria is, and you say it's dysphoria, and so does your medical profession. You've gone to school for a long time. You tell me that way longer than me, at least 12 years with your residency, probably 16. And you tell me that it's a complex answer what a man and a woman is. I think that says everything that it needs to say. I appreciate you coming today. We just fundamentally, we disagree. The science is simple. Gender and sex are different. Medical stuff should be easy when we're defining what a man and a woman is. I'm just
clearly more complex if we're here having a hearing about it.
How is it complex?
You're just
My
an
4
idiot.
and 6-year-old can tell you what a man and a woman is, ma'am. All day long. They can define it
and
easily
all of my
in the most
patients,
simple terms. And you tell me it's complex.
because my patients come to me and tell me what their gender is. They say that I'm a
But
woman.
scientifically, if a child or a patient came and told you something that was totally off the wall, you would say, hey, that's way off the wall. But when it comes to sex, you're listening to them.
We look at patterns. Lots of people talk about this. Lots of people have this issue.
I'm going to be very respectful, but tell you, this is part of the problem. The people that are doing these things to the children and telling the parents that this is acceptable and this is the way it happens, and you can't even define to me, you tell me that it's complex what a woman is. That is part of the problem. It's a serious issue. I respect the fact that you came here today. We fundamentally disagree, and I thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Representative Alverson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Zwiener, I appreciate you being here again. I know you were at the Senate, and I appreciate you coming back to testify today.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand the process here. So you're a pediatric endocrinologist, is that
I'm
right?
board certified in internal medicine and adult endocrinology. Adult endocrinology generally treats kids with reproductive issues down to about 14 or so.
Okay, so you're not a pediatrician.
No, I'm not a pediatrician.
Okay, so you're an adult, and just, I mean, to be clear, so internal medicine, I did an internship in internal medicine that focused on medical conditions for adults. It doesn't cover children at all.
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear about that. Okay, but what I'm trying to understand is, so, we've talked a little bit about, studies, and you said if we want to get into that, we can, and I'd like to. Honestly, because I think part of the problem we have here is that everybody's pointing to the same data and asserting it means something different. So what I'd like to know is, you had said in your testimony that these treatments, the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones, resolve the gender dysphoria. And I don't know if you said this or not, so you may not have, but just to be clear, do these treatments actually reduce the risk of suicide in these adolescents?
Yes.
And can you quote for me the study that says that?
I can. And one thing to know with studies, you know this, you're a physician, but the way that we come to find out the truth in science is complex. Again, I know we don't like that word. Every study is different. We look at the accumulation of evidence. There are small studies that show that there is no effect on the suicide rate. But when you look at the studies in aggregate, and then you compare that with clinical experience.
Okay, but not clinical experience. I don't want to talk about clinical experience because that's anecdotal. And you know as well as I know that that's poor science, because there's no control group when we're talking about anecdotal stuff. So what I want to know is what study I need to know. I want to know author, journal, publication date. What are we talking about here? Just so we can be all on the same page.
So there's one by a group at Harvard done by Dr. Turbin, had 20,000, was published, where was this one? Plus one.
Okay, so Turbin.
He had two, 2020 and 2022.
2020, 2022.
And those are some of our best studies because they are big, 20,000 adults. Most of these studies we look at have
20,000?
50 children, something like that.
Now, I appreciate you because I do think
there is a study tracking 20,000 kids. 20,000? Does that give anyone else pause? Oh, adults? Well, then it's not relevant. Then it's not relevant to the question being asked. If they transitioned as adults, then it's not relevant to the question being asked at all.
And I thought I said this in my layout, but I hope everybody kind of hears it. I'm not trying to pick on you or anything, but I really feel like that's something we should be doing as we're going through this conversation, because everybody's pointing at the science and saying the science agrees with me, and I want it to be
really clear. What I mean when I say it's not relevant is if you start tracking an adult who transitions as an adult and then say it decreases their risk of suicide because they transitioned as an adult, that is not the same thing as tracking a child who transitioned and, you know, the outcomes of that. These are two completely different cases. These are two completely different inclusion-exclusion criteria. Like it is not an it is you cannot use a study for adults and say that it's applicable to children.
Clear as we're talking today about, which authors are we talking about, which study, so that we can all look, because one of the beautiful things about science is it isn't science unless you publish it, right? Which means the world can see, the world can look at your methods, the world can look at your results, and the world can look at whether your conclusions line up with your study design, your materials and methods, and your results. And sometimes they don't, right? So I appreciate that. So I'm going to come back to that, and we may end up having to come back to that afterwards here because I have a couple other questions. But when a young person is referred to you, are they seeing a behavioral health specialist before they come to see you, or are you the one that makes the initial diagnosis of gender dysphoria?
All patients who come to me have seen a mental health professional. Most of them have done that on their own. Some of them, when they call to make an appointment, we say, you have to be in treatment with a mental health professional.
And for how long do you require them to be undergoing mental health treatment before you're willing to have a conversation with them about puberty blockers or hormones?
I don't have a hard and fast rule about the length of time. What's important to me is that I feel comfortable making that diagnosis and that they do have a mental health professional that they have been in a relationship with. I'm the last step in the process. So most of these kids have been socially transitioned for years. They've been in therapy for years. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a.
Okay, that's fair. I guess, are we talking a year? Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking 1 month? What are we talking about here between the time in which they sought out mental health and the time in which you begin treating them medically?
Usually it's at minimum a year, but it just.
Usually
it generally.
What's the shortest period of time?
Honestly, probably about a year. Most of these kids, I'm trying to think. I can't think of anybody that I've seen for less.
Okay, that's
had
fair.
mental health for less
That's
than
fair.
a year.
That's actually encouraging to me because, like the Dutch protocol says it's a minimum of 6 months, right? And so I get nervous when I hear people say 1 month, 2 months, whatever.
Oh, no.
You would agree that's completely medically inappropriate.
Yes. And I mean, we should also recognize our common ground here. Everybody wants what's best for the kids. I have no incentive to get as many kids to be on hormones as possible. That's
okay. I get that. Now, to that end, have you seen patients that you've talked to them and you've kind of gotten to know them and you've said, you know what, I don't think you have gender dysphoria and I don't think you belong in this clinic?
Yes.
So you have turned patients away?
Yes, not many. Again, because I'm the last step. They have to have gone through a therapist who has diagnosed them with gender dysphoria. But I've had a few when I've told them, this seems a little bit sudden. Let's wait a little bit.
Well, let's talk about that because sudden is kind of the thing that I know is being discussed a lot in this issue right now, because if I'm not mistaken, we've seen a dramatic reversal in the data recently in the last, 5 to 10 years in terms of the presentation, the sex at birth, and sort of the way this is rolling out. It used to be, as I understand it, was mostly adolescent boys expressing gender dysphoria. Now we have a ratio, I think, if I remember correctly, of like 4 to 1 adolescent girls to boys. Is that right?
Depends on where you're looking at.
Okay. And so I keep hearing about this concept of rapid onset gender dysphoria, and where you just kind of rolled your eyes.
Look at how
I'm
he
going to guess that you think that's
backdoored
the fake thing, but
it was.
I'm aware there are studies out there looking at trying to figure out why is it that we've seen this rapid reversal between girls and boys, because whenever you have a change in a population, that doesn't typically just happen on its own, right?
Correct.
And so I wanted to ask you about that and get your perspective. What is the explanation for why is it now that it's mostly girls and not boys that are coming for this treatment?
So first, I want to address rapid onset gender dysphoria. There was one paper published where the author came up with this new diagnosis of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Her study was on parents, never talked to the kids. The parents were recruited from online support groups where they went because their kids were trans and they didn't understand it. They didn't really support it. It was a very biased sample. They never talked to the kids. And if you are transgender or you think you might have some questions about gender and you know your parents are not supportive, I mean, any good teenager would hide that from their parents.
Sure.
And that's why a lot of the time when you talk to the adolescents, they'll say, no, I've known this for a long time, but of course I didn't tell my mom.
This is also exactly what we saw, or at least what's alleged, with the clinic at Washington University in St. Louis, right? Where this person that was working there, who herself self-identified as an advocate, said that I started to see clusters of young women from the same schools, sometimes the same classes, who knew each other, one after another, identifying as trans. Now we know, I think from the Cass review, that I think the statement was made that social transition is not a neutral act, right? In other words, that it has an effect on a child's development, right? Just like any other thing, you know, children are impressionable, right? And I think we would be fooling ourselves if we said that there's no such thing as peer pressure.
Right.
Right. And so I also know, well, I tell you what, I know we got to get to that. We'll come back and finish this conversation. I am enjoying talking with you, and I hope you don't feel threatened. I'm enjoying having this conversation.
Thank you.
We'll pick it up after.
Members, we'll be convening on the floor at 2.
Oh, it looks like
just a
they're
few
going to
minutes.
recess now.
It's my intention to recess.
All right, guys. Well, that brings us up to the end of part 1, and we are about 3 hours into this stream. So I think it's a nice time to take a little break. Now, have people enjoyed this? Because I really have, to be quite honest, and I found the testimony to be really informative. I found it to be like a really nice lay person, like they're talking in layman's terms so people can understand them. Everyone's even keeled except for that lesbian lady on the end there, but she's going to add the spice for us. I've been really enjoying this. So I think what I would like to do, because it's 8 o'clock, I have some other stuff I need to do tonight. I think I would like to end this stream here, but I think I would like to pick it up and continue with this tomorrow. Now that was the first one, okay? The next part of this is almost 9 hours long. Now, I cannot guarantee that we are going to get through the whole second part of the stream, okay? But we're going to do our best, because I really do think that this is important, and I really I'm finding it very informative. So we are going to pick it up tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, as I said earlier, my schedule, and I'm just going to bring this up just to remind you all to subscribe to my Substack while we're talking. My schedule tomorrow is a little bit different, because I am going to be going to a Liberty Women's movie night in New Hampshire. We rented out a movie theater, and we're all going to watch a movie, like 60 Liberty women, with no men allowed at all, because the men have lost their minds in New Hampshire and they've been excommunicated. And the women are actually the functional group now, which is bizarre. Anyway, so I'm doing that tomorrow. So I need to get a handle on what time I need to leave my house tomorrow. And it's probably going to be around 5 o'clock I need to be done by. What that means is that I might start the stream a little bit earlier in the day. And I also, and I'm not guaranteeing this, I may come back and stream later in the evening if I feel like it. Or we could actually continue to pick this up during happy hour if we wanted. But that's going to be what I'm really saying is it's going to be a little bit of a wonky streaming schedule tomorrow. So everyone, please make sure you're following me on Twitter, or you're in my locals community, or you're subscribed to the channel with the notifications turned on. I will do my best to let you know what time we're going to be streaming. So if you want to come live, you can. But of course, you can always find it later if you don't make it. Because I do want to continue this. I think it's really good. I think it's, I think it's important content that more people need to see. So I really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me for about 3 hours today. As a reminder, there's a new article on my Substack all about Gabrielle Clark's new website and her program to help parents whose kids have been sucked into the gender cult. Gabrielle did successfully deprogram her daughter from the gender cult after her daughter got sucked into it via a combination of something that happened in school and also things on social media, stuff like that. There is in the article, if we just go into it, bing, and I will pop this link in the description below if people want to check this out. If you have school-age children, especially teenage girls, please make sure you check this out. And yeah, Alexandra says Gabs's program works. Gabs developed a parenting program that helps parents to deprogram their children from the gender cult. And there are a couple things that you're going to find in this article. One is going to be a link to actually a program that Gabs and I put together for Actively Unwoke. You can find it at activelyunwoke.com/on-demand. And you can follow the link in the chat. Yeah, she was there on Monday. She lives in Texas. This is her thing that she does, and she loves working with you guys. But you can actually get access to her on-demand program on the website. It's about 3 hours long. So you can check that out there. But also, Gabs has a new website up. It's affirmingreality.com. I don't know why it's not loading right now. My internet's being a little wonky, but hopefully it will. I will put the link in the description below. And so Affirming Reality, well, I'll put that up until it's going to load. As soon as I click off of it, it's going to load. Affirming Reality is her new coaching business that she's launching to work with parents one-on-one and in groups to help them when their kids get sucked into this and to teach them how she helped her daughter, what they need to do, and all that good stuff. She is a wonderful resource for everyone that is struggling through this. And so please make sure if you need this information, great. But even more than that, please share it. Share it with the parents you know. If you know of anyone that's looking for services like this, please share it. Make sure people are aware of what's going on and that there are people out there that will help them. I've got a couple more articles that I'm working on for Actively Unwoke. That one should be up later today. One probably is going to be up tomorrow, but we're going to see. I got a little bit of a backlog from last week. But guys, I am still trying to hit my goal of getting 75 new paid subscribers on my Substack by the end of the month. We are winding down now. I'm giving myself a little leeway this month because last week was a nightmare for 18 different reasons that have nothing to do with this. But so things got busted up a little bit. We have to be a little bit flexible. But if you appreciate the work I'm doing, bringing you this type of content, explaining it, breaking it down in a nuanced way, I hope you will consider supporting me through a subscription on my Substack, $5 a month, $50 a year. You can also support me through a subscription in my locals community or on my Patreon. But the Substack is really the one I'm trying to push right now, and that helps keep me in business. I cannot do this without your financial support. So if you find value in this, I hope you'll consider funding it and making it possible for me to do what I do. And I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, that's all I have for right now. Please mount that like button on the way out the door. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Take care. Have a great rest of your night.